or are we not? Are we or are we not live? We oh wow, we're way live. Yeah, my screen froze. Okay, hi, welcome to the Breakfast Club. And as usual, we will have no doubt more people filtering in as the evening moves along. For example, here's our friend Joe. Greetings.
Hello.
Hey, Joe.
Hey guys, heard you missed me. I'm back.
Yeah, heard you miss me. Yeah, we did miss you, man. It would have been. I saw what you posted though, your actual result, obviously, and it's hardly surprising. Did you find it surprising? Were you surprised that the test was kind of accurate in a way that you might not have expected?
A little bit. I mean, in part, I think in the past, whenever I've done these, I didn't select like the neutral result, mostly because I didn't feel neutral about those things. Unfortunately, there was like so what I started doing with some of these. It's kind of like I kind of agreed to a degree, but not 100%. And like even somewhat agree was too strong. So there was elements I agreed, but there was elements I disagreed. So that's why I started picking that, and that's I think what actually made it more accurate. Because I think in the past when I've done it, it actually had me coming up more liberal than I really am.
Right.
Because I was always asked, because there was very little that I've ever answered on those that was on the conservative side, but because I was always answering either somewhat or completely agree, then it made me look more than I am. So when I started picking more as neutral, which I'm not really neutral on, but again, it's stuff that I just agree with even less than I would say somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, it was like neutral / undecided, and for me, undecided means yes and no, so neither. So
Yeah.
that was the only time I picked neutral when if I answered neutral, which is seldom. It would be because neither, yeah, I agree, but also I disagree. It depends on which way you take this, and I'm not going to pretend I know which way it's meant to be taken, or is it meant to be taken in a particular way? Blah blah blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, I'm not normally a neutral kind of guy.
No, and me either, as you well know. But yeah, I think the final results, because it called me a social liberal, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds accurate. I'm not. I'm and it's interesting because when you had the comparison, the two, one against one, the four things, it has me, again, fairly progressive, but not like radical, but also, but I'm not an anti-capitalist, for instance.
Right.
So, and while I am definitely someone who thinks we need to be a citizen of the world, I'm also not someone looking to tear down all the borders and all that either. I do think territorial sovereignty matters to a certain degree.
Sure. Well, there you go. I mean, because me and Kazoom all came out as libertarian socialists. Yeah, and some people think that's like a contradiction in terms, but it's really not if you think about it. It depends on how you define the terms, I suppose.
Right. Well, yeah, because usually when we think of libertarian, and I know usually that's why I always give the caveat when you and I are talking is I'll say right wing libertarian with because when most people stay libertarian, that's what they mean. They mean someone of the political right who is on the libertarian axis. But you're right. It's not that's not an accurate portrayal either.
Well, I mean, it really, really comes down to how you define libertarian, but I mean, I just use the dictionary and that's good enough for me. You know what I mean? I don't need to put all the gravy on it that people put on it.
Yeah. I mean, basically it's anti-authoritarian.
Well, yeah, I mean, it stresses the individual liberty as, kind of paramount in sort of the way you should approach law and whatever. I can dig that.
Yeah.
In fact, I would go further than that. I would say your rights emanate from the fact that you own your own person. It's nothing that God gave us or anything. The fact is that if you want to assume the rights of a sovereign individual, then you have to also grant those rights to everybody else. Otherwise, it's not right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead, Mike.
the difference between the right-leaning libertarian and the left-leaning libertarian is the left-leaning libertarian, the social libertarian, can see the benefit of a library as giving you more liberty.
Right.
Because the information being free to everyone creates more liberty for everyone. But there's a tax involved. The right-leaning libertarian's like, fuck that.
Right.
I'm not paying for something unless I want it.
Yeah, and the thing is, and that's one of the reasons why I could never be a right wing libertarian, because they're like, one of the statements that they have you answer the question on is, the freer the market, the freer the people. Too much of their view of liberty is centered on personal property, commerce, and wealth.
Sure.
And not too much else. Like you said, like my thing is, well, yeah, liberty is important, and I'm very, body sovereignty and personal sovereignty are very important to me. But if your health is poor and you have no means to do anything about that, or if your neighborhood's dangerous and you have no means, I mean, basically, if you notice in the U.S. at least, anarcho libertarians tend to be young and male, people who are physically capable of defending themselves. Like, well, what about if you're old and infirm like me? I'm not so tough like I used to be. And I understand that not everybody can have their M60E3 and fire it. We're not all Rambo, so we need some sort of auspices to protect Mabel, because she can't protect herself.
You just gave me a thought. I'd like to steer the conversation in a slightly different direction, but I read a tweet the other day that said something along the lines of, it seems awfully convenient that right at the end of the Derek Chauvin trial, there's all these videos of cops shooting people, blah blah blah, or whatever. It's like, and I replied to the guy, I'm like, well, maybe that's because this happens like pretty often, To me, that's kind of obvious, but they're implying some sort of sinister grand design behind all this stuff. And if there is a sinister grand design, I think we should call it white supremacy and admit that he sees it now. But they don't see it as that. But that's what it is. And it just.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's why, like, when all the people who get upset when black people don't want kneel for the national anthem or won't stand up or whatever, and they get so incensed, and it's like, well, my experience with America is very different than yours, And see, the thing is, what I love about America are the ideals, but basically the fact that a lot of those ideals, like I love America the most when it lives up to those ideals, but for some of us, it just doesn't. And I had a conversation just today with somebody about reparations. And a lot of people that are, even people on the left that are against it. And things, my point was, it's not just for slavery, it's for the Tuskegee experiment and, Tulsa 1921 and redlining and cops blowing us away on the street without accountability. It's like the crime didn't stop. It just got pulled back a little bit, and plus the fact that we're a big part of the prison population, even though we commit crimes at the same rate, we're disproportionately represented in prison because the 13th Amendment, or it was 15th Amendment, whatever it was, it didn't completely outlaw slavery. It still said if you're in prison, you can still be basically a slave. Right. And so the nature of slavery, it didn't go away; it just changed.
Sure.
So as far as it being convenient that there's more shooting news right now, the one that happened in the same vicinity as the courtroom this week was over the top tragic. When I actually had tears when I heard the audio from that, because oh my gosh, that's just all around tragedy. But it happened in the same neighborhood. What are the chances?
There's literally 1 degree of separation. 1 degree of separation between his family and George Floyd's family. I think someone in George Floyd's orbit was a teacher of Dante or something like that. Like literally 1 degree of separation. That's how close the community was in terms of the two tragedies. So yeah, it's pretty bad. And I don't think convenient is the right word, even for people who are suspicious about, think that this is all like political theater or whatever, which is an obscene fucking concept as far as I'm concerned. This is the future of our country. Are we going to hold people in uniform responsible or not?
So
And
there's a story.
this is just my opinion, and guys, please feel free to tell me if I'm a little bit too strong on this point. But I think if Derek Chauvin is not convicted, that's basically equivalent to saying that a use of force for 9 minutes and whatever seconds is okay.
Right.
And that can't be ever seen to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, basically,
absolutely have to convict him, and of course, all it takes is one juror to fucking hang the jury. So
if he doesn't get convicted, I don't know if I'll ever stand for the national anthem ever again.
Fair play.
Okay. I'm following a story in Knoxville that happened on Monday. Right, there was a shooting, and it was a black teenager in the boys' bathroom at a high school called Austin East, right, in Knoxville. So I see all the news that is out about it, but there are tons of leaks from the students on TikTok saying, no, what actually happened here that the news is not reporting on and that the police are hush about is officers killed the kid in the bathroom, and then one of the officers shot himself. And it's because of the climate that we're in right now that he's like, oh my God, my life is over. Goes out and shoots himself. And the news is not saying anything about a story like this. But I've been following the little leaks of all these kids that are like confirming, like, no, what the news is saying is not that. So to think that there's like some convenient leak of shootings everywhere, no, there's still cover-ups. They're trying to suppress these stories, and they still come out because one happens every week.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, there are hundreds of such shootings every year, hundreds. And so the idea that it's convenient, it's like, no, it happens so fucking much that just, if you're wondering when the next one will be, just, what time is it, buddy? I mean, actually, if you think about it, I was looking at the numbers. There's more than one. It averages more than one a day.
My comment is more of a question, really, and I ask this genuinely of all of you as Americans, from a country wherein we don't have this experience of daily gun violence. Why do you put up with it as a nation?
Well, I would say previous to this week, I thought, well, maybe we're just so invested in guns because there's like billions and billions of dollars behind it. But hear me out here. This week we had like 6 or 7 women have like blood clots, and then like they pulled the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. They paused it. We're like, it doesn't matter that we've spent billions and billions of dollars on it. Like 6 or 7 people maybe
out of millions.
Out of millions, right? And then I heard about this shooting at a FedEx where like 8 people died. I was like, should we pause FedEx shipments? Or maybe, just maybe, could we put a pause on guns?
Well, I mean, basically, here's the thing. There was and it turned out it was a case based on a case from a couple years ago, but I guess they arrested 2 people that had kidnapped and I think killed a woman. And of course, the fact that this kidnapping and killing whatever made international news. Take a guess of the demographics. I bet you can describe this woman to a T.
I just want to bring attention to a comment from Ford Jonah to answer Brian's question. He says, we don't know how to get out of it. Politicians are bought out by the NRA and gun manufacturers. And that is part of the problem for sure. But that's the problem. The problem is that people think it's legitimate to kill each other. That's the real problem. And as far as I'm concerned, if you don't solve that psychological problem, it doesn't matter how many guns you do or don't have. because I should rephrase that. It would make an impact if we had less fucking assault weapons in the country. I think it's clear now. There's so many assault weapon murders over the past 5 years, and the assault weapons ban ended, I guess back when George Bush was president.
No. Oh yeah. George W. Bush it ended. Yeah.
Yeah. It was from Clinton to Bush, 10 years, and and we can see the results, and even like Republican icons like Ronald Reagan. You can find video of Ronald Reagan saying that the civilians don't need military grade weapons. There's no need for it. Why would we do that in a free and civil society? And I agree. If you want to have a civil society, you don't want people walking around packing.
Right.
Just in general. When I went to Dominican Republic back in 2002, it was terrifying to me that there were people walking around with guns. I thought, wow, this is so far removed from what I thought civil life was like anywhere, really. I couldn't believe it. People just walking around with fucking patrolling their neighborhood, man.
Well, I mean, when to Mike's point, when I started to say about that person that was missing. So yeah, it was a young woman. She was white, blonde, and pretty. Made international news. Now people go missing all the time. They don't ever make the news because they're not white, female, blonde, and pretty. But that the Nordic prom queen makes international news, not just the local news, not just the state news, not just the national news, international news. Mm-hmm. So, like you said, so 6 or 7 women, get blood clots and everything stops. What it really comes down to, the reason why it happens, Brian, is because basically it happens to people, for the most part, that no one gives a fuck about. It happens to minorities and poor white people. No one cares about them at all. That's why when we say Black Lives Matter and then they say, all lives matter, you're like, no, you don't believe that. All lives have never mattered in this country. Native American lives have never mattered in this country. Black lives have never mattered in this country. Poor white lives have never mattered in this country. Hispanic lives have never mattered in this country.
To that point, here in the Denver metro area, in Aurora, we just censured and removed a judge, and one of the parts of the complaint against the judge was because she had that reply to somebody, replied to a law clerk saying, "Oh, well, I think all lives matter." We had a judge that was known for being racist, and part of the removal censure was that statement.
Yeah. And think about that statement. We know for a fact that people who make that statement are basically trying to shut up the conversation about race. Fuck you, Vegas. You're wrong. Fuck you. Shut up. Don't ever talk to me ever. I hate you. You're a fucking disgusting human being.
Oh, come on. Let's dial it back. Yeah. Anyway, hi, Rob, by the way. Welcome. Brian, you've been holding on to a point for some time now. Go ahead and spit it out.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's so many tangents that rise from this. I mean, was it last week or the week before? I picked up on the US news that the NRA was in bankruptcy court and trying to then shift operations to Texas. And there was a bit of a brouhaha going on as to, in their newsletter to members, they boasted about how great they were doing financially. And then the same week they filed for bankruptcy. And there's this whole sort of situation in the courts right now whereby the NRA is effectively suspended financially somehow, pending a court decision on, I'm not sure if it's jurisdiction or something else. So that kind of plays into the NRA ... part of it. If they are in the crisis that they may or may not be in, how does this affect their ability to affect politics? And then again, you've also got, to Joe's point with regards, Pretty White Prom Queen, hits international news. We tend to hear about the wealthiest, again, playing into your point, and the notorious. For example, things that get a lot of grassroots publicity, like George Floyd, etc. Yeah, and it's the mass shootings. But even we don't hear about those on a daily basis. We hear about the ones that actually do make the big national news. Whereas I gather, to get sort of daily statistics like that, even you guys are getting shooting events that you're unaware of.
Yeah. There was a thing there in the last 30 days, or as of like 2 days ago. In the previous 30 days, there were 45 mass shootings. So
Yeah,
A mass shooting, by definition, is when more than 4 people get shot.
right.
yeah.
Right.
So it would be interesting, from a statistical analysis point of view, to try and get some of the metrics on those shootings as well, to see if they actually hold with the model that you presented earlier.
Brian, three and a half years ago, as I'm sure you'll recall, some maniac went up into a hotel in Las Vegas and fired into a concert and
Yeah,
60 people and injured more than 800 others. 800
yeah,
in the space of like 9
one guy.
minutes. Yeah, one guy in the space of like 9
Yeah.
minutes. Okay. Not a single law changed. There wasn't even debate about it in Congress. Nothing fucking happened. When Sandy Hook happened back in 2012 or whatever it was, nothing fucking happened. They killed kindergartners and first graders, for Christ's sake. And the guy killed his
Yeah,
own.
I remember
And
both of those
nothing
incidents
fucking
very,
happened.
very, very clearly. And this
So-
was why I asked the question the way that I did. Why do you, as a nation,
Put up with
accept
it. It's like, why do you put up with your abusive father or whatever? I mean, they're there. It's always going to be that way. You don't know how to get out. You're 10. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of that. That's kind of the mentality I think we're stuck in. Rob, what are you going to say?
I kind of actually, I mean, I hate to admit this, but I kind of gave up on anything happening with gun laws or with guns in this country after Newtown. If that didn't change anything, nothing will, because it was, for fuck's sake, it was kids. It was first graders, and it didn't change anything. So if we can allow that, then there's no hope.
Well, and here's one thing, and I think it's coupled to the same thing, because it's the same group of people. You look at the people who stormed the Capitol. Okay. Basically, what are we talking about? Is people that have a hyper sense of what liberty means, over the top. And as we've talked before, there are no absolute rights. My rights and your rights will come in conflict, and then when that happens, there has to be adjudicated, and laws are there to kind of delineate some lines to say, okay, to try as best we can to minimize the loss of the aggregate loss of freedom, so that your rights are not always the ones that are being stomped on. My rights are not always be the ones stomped on. We find a dividing line that's, we think, as best we can, is the most equitable. But when you have the real gun, the gun nuts, the people that are like hyper gun, they have this ridiculous sense of entitlement that in their mind, the only people whose rights are not absolute are everybody else's. It's like their rights are absolute and everybody else's are questionable. So these are the same people who will talk about right to life and how every fetus needs to have a name, but and be buried, if they die, and possibly their mother up on charges for it. But they don't give a fuck about people who die in gun violence. I'm like, well, where's their right to life, right? If we have a right to life, how come you don't care about their right to life? So it really comes down to, because in a background check, if you're a quote unquote law abiding citizen, a better background check system isn't going to infringe you, because you're going to pass, right? Because you're not the person we're looking for. But even that, they stand up against that, because the fact that they'll have a minor inconvenience, you have to wait 15 seconds to get their fucking death stick. That's too much of an imposition to them, and they do not care on how much it imposes on the rest of us. And so that's why, I mean, basically, I've always been someone that says, I would be against, repealing the Second Amendment and all this. I'm reaching the point where fuck the Second Amendment. If we can repeal it, fucking, not that it's going to be practical, but if we have a way to do it, fucking do it. Because I'm sick and tired of the people, the gun nuts, who clearly have no fucking care about the rest of our rights.
Yeah, and the phrase "law-abiding citizen" annoys the fuck out of me. Anytime somebody says that gun laws only affect law-abiding citizens and not criminals, or people don't kill people, guns kill people, or whatever, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Those things are so fucking ridiculous, and law-abiding citizen is so fucking ridiculous, because everybody is a law-abiding citizen until they're not. And you can't wait until somebody shot up a high or a classroom full of first graders before you decide, well, look at that, they were a bad apple. No, it's not bad apples. It's a whole fucking rotten tree is what it is.
Yeah, just like the police.
Just like the police. Yep.
Yeah, just quickly, Mike, and then you can jump in. I know that there is another tangential argument with regards First Amendment and freedom of speech, etc. But there's also a conversation with regards to glorification of gun violence in music and Hollywood movies and TV. And then you've got on top of that another conversation about between people who say, yeah, but we all know that it's fiction, and video games and movies and all of this stuff does not affect people's behavior. And on the other hand, we acknowledge individuals where it has affected their behavior. And so you've got this whole post-Western gun culture that's playing into all of this as well, which is kind of weird.
Where we have made inroads on all of this is that we've put body cams on police. That we have made a lot of progress on. And the story that I was talking about from Knoxville, 11 days prior to this shooting of a kid in a bathroom, the police had to start wearing body cams. The mayor has requested the body cam footage of what happened to that kid, and the mayor got denied. And that's the link that I had Paul put into the chat. That's where the story is right now. If I'm to believe the leaks that are coming out from kids on TikTok, the officer shot the kid. There was no gun. The media reported it as a shootout between an officer and the kid, and we already know that the ballistics show that the bullet did not come from the kid's gun.
Well, and also under what auspices are the police telling the mayor no?
Yeah.
How?
It's in the link, but I think that every time we add body cams to officers, there's all this legal each step of the way, every level, the police unions will block and block and block until there's precedent in their jurisdiction to release the body cam footage whenever the right people ask for it. The mayor asked for it, and he's not getting it.
Well, I mean, you got to ask whose property is that footage? Does it belong to the people, or to the police department, or the individual officers? I mean, it should not belong to the officers. That's for sure. It should be public information, right?
And what's
it belongs to the city.
Footage, you should have access to any CCTV footage that's out there if you're in it. If you or you want to prove that you're not in it, you should have access to it.
What's going to happen when they release the footage and those officers are trying to calm the other officer down by saying, that's all right, we'll just wash it under the rug, we'll say that he shot at you? and no shooting from the kid happened. That's
Yeah,
got
but
just
a lot of
that
crap.
footage is never seen, is it though?
real quick, I just got to say, Brian, I read an article the other day that the Baltimore police have just basically been caught out because they were carrying around toy guns to plant on victims if they needed an excuse to, you know, to say why they had to open fire. What were you going to say, Brian?
I was just responding to Mike saying that bit of the footage, yeah, where they're discussing how to deal with it, you never get to see that anyway.
That's not the case though. That actually has been, and in fact, there's a case of one particular officer that he was so corrupt that after they caught him on camera doing, obviously breaking the law, planting evidence, they had to go back and like over 500 cases got thrown out of court. Some guy down in the South somewhere, he would have, what he did was he turned off his body camera and then turned it back on. But what he forgot is that when you turn it off, in order to avoid cops playing funky games, the thing runs for like 20 more seconds. So he turned off his body camera. He planted drugs in the guy's back on the floor in the back seat, and then turned it on. So he filmed himself planting evidence. And then that basically, yes. And they were like, because this cop had a ridiculous number of like,
I think it was in Philly.
drug stops where he stopped people for traffic things and found drugs, like, were stupid. And where it started to go fuzzy was it was just like hockey mom, it's just some like middle-aged, woman, early 40s, and who never did anything wrong in her life. And he planted like heroin in her car. And it was like, wait a minute, so then somebody said, well, let's look at the fucking footage. And they were like, wait a minute, this motherfucker planted it himself.
Yeah, I think that was in Philly, if I'm not mistaken. It was just a couple of years ago in Philadelphia. Yeah.
Well, there may be more than one. The one I was thinking of definitely was in the South, but I'm sure it's happened many times. I mean, and that's the thing. That's why, like, when people get mad about, defund the cops, it's like, shit, that shit's way overdue. You're muted, Paul.
Yeah, Paul. You want to talk to me? Unmute. Swing it.
Oops. Right. So I say fucking disarm the cops at this point. I mean, if they're going to keep on mistaking guns for tasers, take away the guns and let them keep their tasers. That's the choice we have to make. Which one do you get to keep? You keep the tasers. Thanks very much. And I actually really want to dig in with the group here a little bit about Dante's murder in particular, because I know we started there, but we wandered off, and as we tend to do. But I want to get back to that because, Dante's family is understandably furious because, it's awfully hard pill to swallow that this is just inadvertent boo-boo, right? And I understand why the DA has chosen to pursue charges of manslaughter because, quite frankly, in court, I think that's all you're ever going to be able to prove. It's hard enough to prove intent when intent is obvious. If intent isn't obvious, I don't think you're going to get past the reasonable doubt threshold. So I think it's reasonable and right that they're do a manslaughter charge because that might get a conviction. But I also understand why the family's like, hey, that's not good enough, because here's the thing. We've all probably seen the pictures of the difference between a Glock and the taser. But what they don't tell you when you see those pictures is the difference in weight. A Glock weighs 2 pounds and 5 ounces fully loaded. A taser weighs 8 ounces. So it's almost 5 times less weighty. It's a different shape, a different color, and comes from the different side of you. So negligence, maybe, man. But because here's the thing, if it's murder, you have to ask yourself, what's in it for the cop to kill that kid? What, I had this discussion with someone close to me, and my attitude is it doesn't have to be anything in it for them. They might just simply have such a level of apathy that's like ingrained. It's like, well, it won't matter if I make this mistake because I'm not going to get in any trouble. I mean, I think that's where we're at.
So, yeah, I mean, the other thing, as far to your point, Paul, is that the way that the weapons are stored on your body is your pistol is on your strong hand and your taser's on your weak hand. So if you're thinking, I got to get my taser, you're already trained to use your weak hand. Now, I did see the video. I watched it a few times. She went into panic mode. She went into pure panic mode. Now the question is, why? Why did someone lose their shit? Well, no, was that thing.
No, I gotta say, just let me interrupt for a second. When I was a teenager, I became a volunteer fireman. And the first thing they teach you when you're learning first aid and how to fight fires is don't panic. I'm sure they teach that to people in the military as well, and I'm sure they teach that to cops. And if you can teach me when I was 16 how to not panic when you're confronted with a 6-car accident or whatever, do you know what I mean? These cops can be trained not to panic.
I agree that should be the case. But my point is that's why she should never have been an officer, because clearly she did not have the emotional strength. Because it wasn't like he was armed. He wasn't violent. He was trying to escape. And so people who've made excuses for this, like, well, don't run from the cops. I'm like, yeah, that's not a death sentence. That should not ever be a death sentence, because they knew who his name was. They knew where he lived, so they could have circled back and got him elsewhere. There was no.
You can't outrun the radio anyway, Joe.
Yeah, there's no urgency to get him right away. But the cops, one thing they are trained for in modern day is this idea that if you don't listen to them, you must be put down violently. Violence needs to be employed immediately. And you see this if you watch like these people who do like First Amendment audits, where if somebody talks back to the cop or doesn't comply right away, and you see there's a lot of cops that immediately escalate and try to intimidate. They try to use force.
Why?
Well, because they have this attitude. They've been trained this attitude, like a couple things. One, that they're an authority when they're really not. Two, this idea that they have to control. If they don't control it, the situation will get out of hand. And they're also trained this warrior mentality. When you have when you have them go into a school called Killology, where it's kind of portrayed as cool, like you're a warrior. We have this idea that the job of a cop is so dangerous, and it is in certain parts of the country, but in most of the country, it's totally fucking not. The cops shoot more people every year than die, 8 times more than die in the line of fire.
Yeah, I'd just like to put forward. I don't know how. Of course, you guys remember, but people in the audience may not. YouTuber called Justicar, and back in the day, he used to be kind of the go-to guy when it came to the police mindset. And one of the arguments I heard him put forward time and time again, which speaks to your point, Joe, is this mentality of whenever you go into any situation, you have to be mindful of the fact that it could be your last situation. So your instincts kind of predetermine you towards self-protection first and foremost, yeah, and preservation of the law after that, yeah. So there is that argument that speaks to this point. Secondly, when it comes to the social ingrainment, for want of a better word, of this warrior mentality, it may sound farcical, but I would like to blame those of us, I grew up on Starsky and Hutch. And one of the things that I used to fantasize about when I was a kid in my early teens was becoming a police officer. And those moments when you would stick the evildoer, slam him onto the bonnet and stick the cuffs on. And that was perceived as being a really grand, good, and, chivalrous thing to do.
So I want to say really quick, I just wanted to give a great big and hearty go fuck yourself to Republicus. Hey, Republicus, go fuck yourself. He wasn't known to the police. Nobody said that. That's not what was being said. What was said was they knew who he was because they pulled him the fuck over and they had his plates, you dumb fuck. It wasn't that he was a criminal and that was known to the police. You fucking racist piece of shit. All right, that's all I wanted to say.
Well, see, here's one thing to you, Brian, though, is that the same mentality exists toward people in the military, but the military, not that incidents don't happen, but they actually happen less in the military, and the military actually holds them accountable. Because they have rules of engagement that they have to follow, and if they violate those rules of engagement, they get in deep shit really quickly.
So structurally, I have a problem that's come up from last night in Minneapolis, where they're now protesting 2 deaths, right? In the same place where Dante died in the Brooklyn Park area. So they had this protest, and an echo from my past from like almost 10 years ago, 9 years ago, happened. Everybody there had their internet cut. Anyone who was live streaming on Facebook all of a sudden went dead while the police were doing their sweeps. The police have this ability to jam the internet when they're doing sweeps. This happened to me in 2012 during the Colorado Springs Occupy protest, 2011, 2012. Anytime they would bring their SWAT crew to do their sweeps, the phones would cut out. And to think that we have a Supreme Court ruling that says that, yes, you can film police officers, right? But then when the police officers come, they don't want any live footage of them getting out. So they have the tactical advantage of blocking out all the footage so that the only footage that gets out there is what they release.
I wonder how far and wide that blockage extends.
Well, until their sweeps were over, as far as time, but as far and wide, a couple square miles.
So basically, even if you're not at the protest, but you're in the wrong place, you might have had your shit blocked.
Yeah, and so you can record with your phone, just regular video to your phone, but then you have to leave the area to be able to get to some signals so that you can connect to upload.
Like a war correspondent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, you could still get footage out if you live in that area and you've got a hardwire connection.
Yeah. And
But
they're sending it over the cell phones. But if you were able to get over to like a McDonald's and use their Wi-Fi, you can get it up that way. But it still requires you to record and then go over and upload.
Yes, it does slow it down.
Right in the middle of where they're doing the sweep.
For Jonas says they also blast the Beatles so the videos get blocked by the anti-pirating software.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Well,
it's insidious.
They don't have to blast the Beatles. What they do is they take it's subliminal to your own ears, just the code for the Beatles. They blast that. No one can hear it, but your videos will come up as recognized as other things.
What were you gonna say, Joe?
Yeah, one thing I want to address that was said earlier, this idea that, well, class issues are more of the problem than race issues. It's so monumentally ignorant to think that there's not a connection between class and race and class.
Especially in the U.S.
Especially in the U.S. When wealthy, famous Black people get, dogged by the police, get, followed around stores, have the police called on them when they use their own credit card to buy something expensive in the store. The idea that they're not connected is farcical. So only a fucking moron of biblical proportion would think that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and I think it happens way too damned often. But getting back to Dante for a second, Joe, in particular, I want to ask you the question: do you think that it was intent or apathy or negligence?
I don't think her intent was to kill him, but I think that because she's trained way more to extinguish life than to preserve it, and apathy, I don't think she gave a fuck really, because she could have taken a quarter second to stop. Oh, let me get my taser. No,
Well, that gun was in the frame for almost 5 seconds before she fired it, and that was in the frame. She must have had it in her hand for like a half a second or more than that as well before she got it in the frame.
Right.
And you could clearly see, and I know, heat of the moment and everything. It's easy, hindsight 2020, blah blah blah, all those arguments. But at the end of the day, you could see it wasn't a taser. Tasers are bright yellow on purpose.
Right.
So
I think again, a callous disregard for life, which is why, even though I understand why they didn't charge her with any length of murder, but I think murder 2 would have fit, because that's depraved in most states. That's depraved indifference to life. We basically say you don't care. Your actions could result in death, and you didn't give a fuck enough to regulate yourself.
Just a quick question there. So, do you think that the manslaughter charge is unwarranted and it should be a murder too?
I think any charge that will get her incarcerated is a good charge.
Okay.
Yeah, good answer, Joe. I like that answer. Because I think as much as I understand the calls for harsher charges, we really have to worry. I mean, and Dante's mother herself said, there's no such thing as justice, and that's true for every murder. That's true for other crimes, some other crimes, at least for sure. You can't get justice. All you can get is you can protect society maybe a little bit from it ever happening again, or that kind of thing. Justice is a quaint notion when it comes to murder.
It also feeds into the point that Rob made earlier about everybody is a law-abiding citizen until the moment they're not. That is so especially pertinent when it comes to gun violence, I think.
See, the one thing that, for me, because getting justice or anything even like in the vicinity of justice is so rare, that's why I'm willing to take anything I get. And this is the reason why I'd love to Kate doesn't do these broadcasts anymore, but one thing I'd love to say to her if she were here, because I know she hates the idea of incrementalism, and I'm like, when you're used to basically always getting spit in the face and you never get the results you want, something is an improvement. so because I want to set the precedent. If cops start get held accountable on any kind of basis, it feeds itself. Because again, mentally, I remember in the Amadou Diallo case, the jury didn't convict, and then afterward they interviewed the jury because everyone's like, well, were you insane? How did you not convict this guy? And one of the jurors, former jurors, had said, well, but the instructions we were given and the way the law was written is written so much in the cop's favor that all you had to do was believe that it was reasonable to believe that the cop was scared. So then basically the other person's life was forfeit just because the cop might have been scared. Not that they had to prove that they were scared. They might have been scared.
Well, so, what do you think about the fact that the day Dante got killed, obviously there was a lot of protests, and then the next day the cop who killed him, she resigned, and then the day after that she got arrested, right? Now compare that to Derek Chauvin, who was walking free for how many months after George Floyd died?
Right,
a couple of months, right? I can't remember the exact number. And I think that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Black Lives Matter. Thank you very much, Black Lives Matter, because this shows that the pressure is doing something. Maybe it's not enough, but it's doing something, because they didn't get arrested for a long time. It used to be the DA would think about it for a while and decide whether or not to bring charges, and they usually not bring charges,
Yeah, basically they tried to run out the clock and basically wait until the public ire abated. And then, of course, when no one's angry about it anymore, or no one publicly is angry about it anymore, you could ignore it.
Right, drop it. Yeah.
Well, no, I think you're right, Paul, that BLM and I think also the Chauvin trial itself, because right now everyone is charged. Everyone's, as we've, who's ever watched any part of the trial sees, it's even more infuriating than we originally thought.
Well, I think it's beyond Derek Chauvin on trial. I think the United States system of justice is on trial, because the whole world who chose to watch that video could see that that guy murdered that guy. I mean, it's to me, it's not even open for debate, right? So what, Ryan?
Yeah, it's just a question popped into my head based on what you guys have just been saying. And that is, when it comes to Black Lives Matter protests, Paul and Joe, because you've been here. When it comes to British society and inherent racism, etc., do you think that the Black Lives Matter protests here are a reflection of what's going on here, or do you think it's more of a case support for what's going on over there in the US? And do you think that support is actually beneficial?
I think it's both. I think it's a reflection. It's a reflection of solidarity with people here, but I think it's also about some British issues as well. I mean, you don't have the police mowing people down problem because your cops generally are not armed. But there's definitely, bias. I've seen, again, I watch a lot of videos on this stuff, and I've seen a number of videos of non-white people, and it's not in there. Of course, it's not just black. It could be, Middle Eastern or Indian, or East Asian, but tons of cases where I'll say apparent bias going on. And even the fact that, look, your monarchy. I mean, the guy, the piece of shit that just died. I mean, everyone's like, "Oh, poor Prince Philip." I mean, he has a history of saying dramatically racist bullshit. So that's why I believed everything that Meghan Markle said, because we know at least one person in Buckingham Palace was an avowed racist. So there's a problem in Britain, I think, with the Nigel Farages of the world.
Right, so it's more a case of racism at the top rather than ingrained in the society as a whole, at a grassroots level.
I think there's some grassroots, but I think there's less than there is here. I think it's the same people. It's kind of like the people here. You have people in the bottom here who support their oppressors at the top because they don't know any better, because they get mollified by all the nativist talk. You have a nativist movement in your country as well, which is why Brexit happened.
Yeah.
So it's very much of the same thing. You have some at the bottom and you have some at the top.
We're just briefly touching Brexit. Brexit and Cambridge Analytica, it's kind of known but not really acknowledged that Brexit and the lies was a dry run for your presidential that same year.
Yeah. Oh,
so
yeah.
That was more of a statement than anything else.
I concur.
It's a shame Mike's gone because we seem to have sort of dried up. I don't know if that's just because you're chewing on something, Paul. You might have more to direct us with on this, but
I was quiet to let other people talk.
I wanted to, when Mike comes back, I actually wanted to ask him a question on his last video that might be discussion worthy. I'm not sure. It certainly ties in with what he's talking about in the chat.
Right. Well, yeah. The whole thing when it comes to the murder of Dante, or the killing of Dante, because I guess you're not going to apply murder to it. And then obviously last year with George Floyd and everything, and the frequency, I think it was Will Smith who said, it's not happening more often, it's just getting filmed. And I think that's the only possible thing that's ever going to change things, is because people are going to get to the point. I can't believe, Brian, that we're not already past the point of people being so sick of it that change is forced by the sheer, I mean, it's an interesting point. I saw a tweet the other day that said the right-wing conservatives are here to convince you that killing someone is an appropriate response to property damage, but property damage is not an appropriate response to killing someone.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to make a great deal of sense. It's not one of those grass is green, therefore green equals grass situations. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I mean,
but Marcus made a good point earlier on, which I think is something that's worth discussion. Cops shouldn't be able to get off with manslaughter because they should be held to a higher standard. Now, I personally think I agree with that yes, if you're in a position of authority, then you should be held to a higher standard because of training, badge,
Yeah.
etc., setting an example, what have you.
I tend to like emotionally want to agree with that. The problem is like the law is kind of standard, and we don't want to end up having like a different set of laws for somebody because they happen to be in a position of authority or in a higher responsibility, but they should be held to a higher standard at the same time. So it's kind of a weird thing. And the thing with manslaughter is it fits. I it doesn't have to like it. You don't even have to agree. But in this particular circumstance, manslaughter fits. It fits, and they're likely to get it. Um, but we'll see.
See, the thing is though, is right now under the law, there's actually a lower standard for cops, and that's the biggest part of the problem.
That is the biggest part of the problem. They got qualified immunity for almost everything.
Right. And even like I said, and even when qualified immunity doesn't apply, like the Diallo case, where it wasn't qualified immunity, it was simply that the law is written such the way that for a cop using violence against, if you used the violence against a cop and they blew you away, I mean, you literally could throw something, throw a pebble at them, and they could turn around and blow you away and get away with it. Whereas if they, the other way is not so. So that, basically simply that I was scared is a valid defense. That's a much lower bar than the rest of us.
Yeah. What do you guys think about, there's certain suggestions that have been made by Black Lives Matter and others. For example, I mean, shouldn't there be, why isn't there a registry, a place, a website where you can go and find out what cops have had, the complaints against them and which ones have been upheld and which ones have been rejected and blah, blah, blah. Because do you think if there was such a thing that it would have any deterrent effect on misbehavior by the police?
Very briefly, I think public accountability is a fundamental must because, you are in a position of authority. Therefore, you should be accountable to your badge and your actions. End of story.
Well, the other thing, an idea that I heard, I agree with you as far as the registry goes, but I think on top of it is if you had to, if as an officer, if you had to have liability insurance the way like nurses do,
right,
that would dry up the shit really quick, because what would start happening is, for one, instead of taxpayers having to pay for the horrible things that some cops do. Secondly, if these guys started having problems where it starts hitting their insurance, they can become uninsurable, which means they become unhirable.
right.
Because part of the problem that we have is the reason why so many cops quit when they do something really bad is that, generally speaking, disciplinary hearings and all those things stop because you're no longer an employee. So they do that on purpose so that they can go to another jurisdiction and get another job and do the same shit they were doing before.
Kind of like priests.
Exactly, just like priests. So if you make it an insurance or a licensing thing, something that they can lose, now they go to another jurisdiction. Like, well, sorry, which in a way we kind of should do with driver's license too, but that's another story. But yeah, that's the big problem, that they basically can escape justice simply by quitting in a lot of cases where what they did was not bad enough to necessarily get charged, or because the prosecutors tend to be on the police's side and decide not to prosecute, but they would at least get some official reprimand, and they just quit, and then that ends.
I'm trying to let someone else talk because I talk too much.
Me too.
It's a shame Mike's eaten, because I'd ask him my question.
Ask him.
I'll let him finish eating first. But maybe we can discuss it and he can just sort of slowly simmer while he's eating until he bursts with this flurry of words.
I'm sure he can engage.
Straight out, Brian.
Okay. In your last video, Mike, you put forward the idea that yoga and golf were your third and fourth
and fifth.
sorry, fourth and fifth most common reasons for people sitting in front of you as an addictions counselor.
There were
And that,
second, fifth correlations, but they weren't part of the three that were reasons. At the end, I reiterated the reasons, but the golf thing has only happened since the pandemic, because you tell people that they have to stay in their homes, and all of a sudden they find excuses to leave their home. But a lot of my clients have taken up golf, and yoga was the one that it correlates, but you can't really say it's causal. But there's something about the mindset of getting healthy that people will try yoga right after whatever happened to them, but before they become my client. Sometimes it was always a part of their life, but the desire gets reinvigorated.
do you
I
ever
just-
get clients addicted to the gym?
Yes, we do. And there's actually a gym specifically for people who are dealing with addiction here in Denver. It's called the Phoenix.
Well,
Okay.
That's funny you should mention that. It's a good place for me to jump in. I wish our friend Phoenix Rider was in the chat because she lives in Alabama. And did you guys know that for a period of time, I think they just reversed the law, but I think yoga classes were illegal in Alabama until like this year or last year, where they might actually be. But yeah, apparently it was illegal to teach yoga in Alabama.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. It's a very backward place.
I'm not sure if it's true. That could be like one of those things that is like, really? That's just like, who has time to make that kind of legislation?
Okay, yoga was banned. Yoga was banned in public schools from 1993 onward until recently.
1993 onwards. Okay.
But that was public schools because it was seen as Hindu and if of course, if you had Christian stuff, I'm sure they would have allowed it.
It's kind of funny because, I mean, you know, it does, you basically, you don't have to believe anything to do yoga and for the yoga to do you good. You know, and yoga will do you good, whether you believe in the spiritual side of it or not.
Yeah. So it's like, so stop that Hindu yoga, but now let's have the Christmas pageant.
Yeah, right.
But Christmas pull-ups are okay. Sorry, Christian pull-ups are okay.
Yeah, apparently.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, my family, like my father's from Alabama originally, and there's still family down there. And Alabama's a really fucking backward place.
Wow. Well, I have no opinion because I've never been down there. I'm sure there's lots of pretty country down that way, though, because one thing I've learned since I moved back to America, and I've been driving all over this fucking country, is America's really pretty, man. I mean, I already took that for granted because, you know, I lived in California, which is quite honestly the prettiest part of America, as everyone knows. But like, now that I'm in Colorado, I'm sort of challenging my preconceived notions about my native California because there's something about the grandeur of mountains that just, you know, I mean, when I lived in Alaska, the mountains come right up out of the water, which is also pretty fucking cool, you know. But here, the mountains kind of look down at you and they're like, you poor finite thing, you know.
Yeah, the Colorado's also got some pretty impressive plains as well, leading up to those mountains.
Sure.
And some really nice little outcroppings as well. I did enjoy Colorado.
When you're flying over Colorado from the east towards towards Colorado, or towards Denver, I should say, you can see like there's like on the flats there's like nothing, and then there's literally a square, and there's a whole town built into like a square. It's the funniest thing I ever saw, and there's nothing else. There's nothing surrounding the square. Everything's been put in this little weird.
So
Yeah, well, you see that flying over the United States generally. Texas, I found particularly strange flying over because you've got these huge patches of circles, which is yeah, and it's not just the water treatments and the oil treatment plants. You've also got huge, what looked to me like circular crop regions as well, which circular crop growing.
That's because the well's in the center and the irrigation system rotates around.
Yeah, yeah, it's just a fascinating way to reclaim what would otherwise be arid wasteland.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Big stretches of the United States is actually desert.
Yeah, I don't know about arid wasteland though, Brian. I mean, the plains used to support millions of buffalo, and antelope for that matter. You know what I mean? I mean, before people came around, this place was teeming with life.
True, true. But Texas in particular is one of those states where you start one end and you've got lush forests, and then you sort of gradually turn into desert, like high mountain, dry desert. And it really is a fascinating transition to watch from that height.
Yeah, I've never been to Texas. I don't have any plans to, but I'm not against going to Texas. What were you going to say, Rob?
I just wanted to interrupt this talk about how pretty the country is to tell Republicus to fuck off again, because I enjoy telling him to fuck off. Because he said it's a Christian country and to get used to it. And I got news for you, you dumb, backwards motherfucker. It is not a Christian country. It is a country of Christians. And those are two completely different fucking things. And not only are we not a Christian country because, I just said so, we're not a Christian country because it's in some of the paperwork that had been ratified by Congress by our founding fathers. So, fuck you very much.
Treaty of Tripoli.
Treaty of Tripoli. Yep.
Hi, Kazoom.
Hey, Kiz.
Hey, good to see you.
And actually, I would also point out that it's the country is increasingly getting less and less Christian. 10 years ago, 65% identified as Christian, and in 2020, that's down to 59%.
If
And
you
then-
want to get,
Oh,
I was just going to say, if you want to get really picky, 300 years ago, which is not a long time in the great scheme of things, technically you'd be talking a pagan country. So
I was just going to say that I saw some statistics, and maybe I have it in my head wrong, but it's like the amount of people who just generally who do not consider themselves organized religious. They might still be spiritual, but those who don't I should say those who consider themselves organized religious has gone down to like what 49% or something like that. So that's a good sign.
Well, in the UK, from the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, 90% of people attended church at least once a month. Now it's 10%, 100 years later. So,
Yeah.
can I just point out that you can't beat as an alternative to organized religion the personal ministries of people like G-Man and what's his name, Burns, and
Oh yeah, disorganized religion.
dare we say Venom Fanglorious X.
what I found interesting about my experience of raising my kids in the UK as far as religion and the state is concerned is because the UK does have an official state religion, the Church of England. And plenty of schools that you send your kids to are Church of England schools, whatever that means. I guess it means they get some of their funding from the government, some of it from the Church of England. I guess that's what it means, but I don't really know. Anyway, but in the schools when my kids were growing up in the 90s, yeah, they teach the kids about religion, but they teach them about all the different religions, and they don't teach them any one of them is right. They just say, here's what Christians believe, and they give you this big speech about that, and then you learn about that for a week or two or whatever, and then you learn about Buddhists for a week or two, and you learn about Muslims for a week or two, and you learn about Hindus and Sikhs for a week or two, and you learn about Judaism, and then you learn about other stuff, and it's just like that. Yes, Brian.
Yeah, one of the reasons for that is because over the centuries we have suffered and suffered greatly as a result of religious violence. Not least of which is the troubles that Ireland is now slowly submerging into.
Go on, Rob.
I just wanted to real quick. Fuck you, Republicans, you piece of shit. You even know what that word means. You don't even know what that word means. So fuck you. Sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
that needed to be said. I'm with Rob on that one. Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean, something that I can increasingly get frustrated with. Again, and not just from right wingers or left wingers. Like, these terms that like using and nobody's using them right, and which is why I tend to avoid them because, no one they don't know what they're fucking talking. No, I know people who call themselves communists who aren't fucking communists. I know people who call themselves, socialists who aren't really fucking socialists. I know people, and of course, the right wingers don't get anything. They don't even know what democracy means. So,
I'd just like to point everybody to last week's show and the 8 points political test that we did. Yeah.
yeah, we were discussing it earlier. So for those who weren't here earlier, but you were here last week, I did it, and I was classified as a social liberal, which is probably reasonably accurate.
And I'm a socialist libertarian.
Me too.
I can't.
Rob, we need to
Kazum had
come
his
up with a flag for. We need to come up with a creative flag for social libertarianism.
That would be neat. The
I
test
can't
had to make
remember
up
if
a category for Kazum. A category didn't exist, so the test made one up. It was pretty cool.
Really?
What? No, it was the same as yours, Rob.
It was Kazumism.
Zoomism.
I can't remember if mine came out social democrat or democratic socialist. But
Well, yours came out
apparently there is
Democratic
a
Socialist.
distinction. Yeah,
Well,
there is a distinction because the wife came out with the same, but the words reversed.
yeah,
So they do make a distinction.
there's definitely a distinction between social democrat and democratic socialist. That's the thing. Bernie Sanders is actually more accurately a social democrat than he is a democratic socialist. But
Yeah, well, gonna split hairs about it. Peace, love, and understanding, everybody. I love y'all. Let me hug you.
Yeah, from what I can remember, analyzing our results, it sort of boiled down to nation versus world engagement, and what was the other one?
There's
Our
equality.
scores on,
There's equality and versus markets. There's nation versus world. There's liberty versus authority, and there's tradition versus progress.
yeah, liberty versus authority was the other one as well.
I think I just kicked off a movement tonight.
Someone just pledged themselves the Kazumist.
Yeah,
yeah. Well,
I'm tempted.
And when it comes to theocracy, I declare. I think long ago I declared. I'm with my dog Molly. I declared myself a Molly theist.
Kazum, accidentally and without your intending to do so, Rob has now created a new religion, and in 500 years, Kazumism will be the dominant American religion. And it will have a massive statue, and it will just be a pair of glasses and a beard.
And a Monty Python tribute group will make the film The Life of Kazum.
Well, and I'll say that anything that comes out of Kazumism, the worst thing that comes out of Kazumism will be 100 billion times better and more ethical, moral, and decent than anything in Republicans' shitty head.
And lumberjack shirts.
I mean, yep.
What?
Yeah, we were waiting for.
Say something. Say something.
Words of wisdom. Oh, mighty Kazum.
Meow.
Take a bow.
There you go.
Okay, I think a good portion of the panel here is are Babylon 5 fans, or at least to some degree.
Best TV show ever.
Yes, if you recall, when Jakar is trying, the Book of Jakar gets printed against his will, and then he becomes like a religious icon, and he's got these people all around him, and he's trying to explain, his view of the world, and what is truth and what is God. And of course, they're looking for some simplistic bullshit answer, and he gives an actually very good answer, and they're like, but what is truth and what is God? Like, and there's
I'm not a fan, but I know the scene you're talking about because I used it in a video. It's a
Oh, really?
fantastic. It was a fantastic philosophy. Yeah, that's pretty good.
If I remember rightly, it went along the lines of river is God and we are the stick.
Yeah, he said, what is truth is a river and God is the mouth of the river is what he said.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Trust me, I could recite the whole series right now.
Oh yeah, and of course,
it's been a while since.
Yeah,
I was going to say it's been a while since I've watched it, but yeah.
Oh, I watched. See, now that it's on HBO Max, I watched it again. Start to finish. I gotta watch the whole series in like 2-3 weeks.
I've got it on a hard drive somewhere. I think I might dig it out again.
Since when did Republicans become a fucking what do you call it?
Theist.
I think he's playing devil's advocate or something here.
I just want to say one thing. I just want to interrupt just to say one thing. Republicans, go fuck yourself, you piece of shit. I mean, seriously. You know how I know things are real? Because I have fucking eyes. That's how I fucking know. Fuck you. I would tell you what I really think of you, but I've now recently has come out as trans. So because of that, I have to be ladylike, and I can't tell you what I really think. Fuck you, you piece of shit. Fuck you.
Yeah, he's basically doing a bad version of what was that? A size 10. Size 10 suck my dick.
And I would like to thank Rob for being so restrained. It's very ladylike. Thank you.
So there's nothing about believing in a God that gives anyone special power to know anything either, Republicans, because everyone is making the non-solipsistic assumption that reality exists and we have some means, however flawed, to perceive it.
The universe is only as real as pain.
Even science agrees with that assumption at its core.
Yep.
That's really deep, man. That's the kind of thing you think of when you're really high.
Well,
Yeah.
With the amount of infections going around my body and the slight detachment that I have as a result, I think, yeah, I'm touching God right now. So,
I got a totally different vein to talk about real quick, just briefly. So I wasn't here last week. I think most of you guys know Divinity 33372.
Sure.
So she, up until very recently, lived in Texas. So last weekend I was helping her. She flew to Philadelphia. I was helping her get settled. That's still an ongoing progress. She got a job today. So Odie is no longer a Texan. She's happy to get out and now is living in Philadelphia.
Which is basically New Jersey. Anybody in the Philadelphia area is aware of this. It might be Pennsylvania, but no, they're all, that's all New Jersey.
Yep. Republicans, you dumb piece of shit. We're both making the same assumption at the beginning, but then you're assuming other things beyond that, which I'm not, which is why you're still a dumbass.
Did I miss a chance to tell him to go fuck himself? Oh, I did.
Well, no, it's still there. It's still there.
Republicans, go fuck yourself. Seriously.
and just for everybody else, because it's fun to make this point. For us to have an intelligible, sane conversation about Babylon 5, we have to first agree that Kosh actually exists and can exert mind powers.
There you go.
Just above that, I just want to address Vegas. You don't congratulate someone for coming out trans and then detonate them in the same line. That's just not done. It's a little bit uncouth. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, have you changed your name? I didn't know.
I haven't.
I was going to say, is Rob still valid?
he's basically correct though. But I mean,
Oh yeah.
but no. I mean, I actually a lot of my friends online have been calling me Raven, and it's a combination of my kids' names. So my two oldest kids. So it's like Dev Shell, except it's the opposite of Dev Shell
Hmm.
because Dev Shell is also a combination of their names. Um,
I get it, Rob.
it's kind of cool. It's kind of neat, and I like it. Um, so I'm kind of trying it on. So,
That's cool.
No, Republicus, you still don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You have to assume that you're not a brain in the vet first to be able to perceive that a God even could exist.
I don't need to know about philosophy 101. You know?
I'd just like to join in and say, screw you, Republicans, you don't know me.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And he certainly doesn't know anything about philosophy, science, education, mathematics, police, government, economics,
or what words mean.
music, art, literature, science.
Music?
But,
Did you say numbers?
well, I said mathematics. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
Grammar, spelling, decency, morals, ethics.
So on to
logic.
something more interesting than Republicus, if you guys don't mind. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? I'm just going to go for a hard left here. What do you think is going to happen to Matt Gaetz, right? I mean, it's getting hotter and hotter.
Who?
Matt Gaetz. He's
Oh,
a
Gates.
congressperson from Florida who's
Yeah.
accused
Sorry,
of
I misheard you.
trafficking minors and other inappropriate behavior.
I think if he's proven guilty, they should throw the key away.
Here's what I think. I think this is true both in Britain and the United States, Brian. It really pisses me off how a sex scandal will bring down not all, but most politicians. A sex scandal will bring them down. But they can be as corrupt as a motherfucker and get away with it right in front of our eyes. You know what I mean? As long as it doesn't have anything to do with their genitals, they can get away with it. It pisses me off.
Makes you wonder why they're so frequent with their genitals then.
We're human.
So I'm thinking that he's going to lose his job, and in about like 4 or 5 years, we're going to have like a made-for-TV movie on the Lifetime channel that is probably following the life of one of the people that he paid for sex with Venmo, and then the person that plays him is going to be Butthead from Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that gets me about it, because, to Paul's point about, if they do stuff with their genitals. So obviously, look, trafficking a minor and having sex with a minor, massive bad things. And I don't think his political job is going to save him from that, thankfully. But the thing that gets me, though, is like just the stuff that he's admitted he's already in hock because he won't shut the fuck up. He just keeps talking and he just keeps admitting to more and more things and trying to minimize them. But the one thing, though, that does bother me a little bit about, not about him, but about the reaction to it, is people keep bringing up like he paid. I don't care. As long as everyone was adults, I wouldn't give a fuck who he paid for sex. We shouldn't care about that. But minors, yeah, whether he paid them or not, that's a fucking massive problem.
Okay, so I had to take my headphones off.
Put your ear dick down.
I had to take my headphones off because they were tangled. So I missed some of the conversation, and I came back and somebody mentioned something about doing something with somebody's genitals. What the hell did I miss?
I just said that, it's amazing to me how, people in politics, if they have a sex scandal, if it's got something to do with sex, they'll get in trouble and they might lose their job. But if they're just openly corrupt about any other thing, it won't matter.
Yeah.
That's all.
Oh, okay.
Par for the course.
But anyway, I personally think that Matt Gaetz is kind of like the poster boy for the new Republican Party, you know, and so hopefully he's going down. I mean, and if he doesn't go down, what do you guys think about this whole thing with like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert deciding to launch a America First, whatever, you know, Anglo-Saxon values? I mean, whatever the fuck is that supposed to mean?
So a couple of things about like, well, okay, first off, like Matt Gaetz, dude, he got denied by Trump.
Right.
You know, his Lord and Savior denied him. So I think he's kind of screwed because he's got nobody now. And as far as the other two dipshits, they're not there to govern. I said this on Facebook. They're not there to govern. That's not what they're in office for. That's not what they got elected for. They don't believe in government. They don't think government should work at all. That their entire thing is do whatever they can to disrupt government.
Right.
That's their deal. That's what they believe in.
I'd just like to ask Rob if he thinks that Spanky, old Trump, has transitioned from king to kingmaker.
No. Do you know why? Because he himself still believes he is the president and still is trying to act as though he's the president and refers to himself as the president. He's not going to get behind anybody else. He's not going to support anybody else for a position that he feels he is rightfully entitled to. So he thinks he's the king in exile, and he's just waiting to retake his throne.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it you that told me he actually had a copy of the Resolute? No, it was
me.
Yeah. I knew I heard it here. I couldn't remember.
Yeah, he had a replica of the Resolute desk for his place at Mar-a-Lago, which is pathetic and gross and scary. You know, I mean, how far gone is this guy?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, yeah, this is sort of more words of comfort from one Anglo-Saxon to a bunch of other Anglo-Saxons. We went through something similar in Europe where when the papacy was split and for a while we had two popes. We got over it, and so will you.
Yay.
Well, it was small comfort maybe, but, you know, positive.
Marcus, the orange guy, he still lives in the bad timeline. Yep.
Well, I think indictments are going to have to come down on Trump sometime in the next 12 months, right? And yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was just going to acknowledge that, yes, we in fact are still living in the bad timeline because ... Brexit.
So they've now basically are saying that there was collusion in the 2016 election. It's the American intelligence agencies are basically now saying that straight out. So I wonder if something from that is going to end up hunting Trump down and holding his feet to the fire about it.
Well, now that he's not in office, there's a better chance of that happening.
Well, the other thing too, yes, and I think that just the stuff in New York State alone is enough to sideline him pretty much for the rest of his horrible life. But also the other way I look at it is, you know, I know Biden is older than him and all that, but basically Biden's also in a lot better shape than him, and I don't see him. He's not going to be someone living deep into his 80s. So, you know, the clock may catch him before the next election anyway, if we're lucky.
I just say, do they need to, given that they've probably got enough with what they're already investigating to do what they need to? I don't know who they are, but it's just an appropriate pronoun.
The New York City and New York State district attorney.
Yeah, I knew this.
Or attorney general in the case of New York State.
I want to take the conversation in a slightly different direction, if that's all right. Kazum, I want to start with you, and we'll work our way counterclockwise around. I want to start with a statement and ask you to give me your plus or minus and whatever. Like, Joe Biden is a better president than I expected him to be. True or false? Better or worse? What do you think?
True. Yeah, he turned out better than I expected. There's
So far.
still some things that I didn't like, but he's turned out a little better than I expected.
Okay, so what do you think he should improve on?
I just hope that the main thing is his warmongering. I hope he can kick that to the side.
Yeah, me too.
But I doubt it.
What about you, Raven?
I I don't know. He's a better president than I expected. As far as what I think, he said coming in that he would hold his people, all of them, accountable. They'd be responsible for the things that they said and things that they do. And there've been a couple of instances now where he's let people not be held responsible. And I think that's an issue. I mean, if you say you're going to do it, you should do it. It's not a deal breaker for me, and maybe it should be, but considering what we just lived through, it's like I'll take this. But I mean, then there are other things. So there's like, do we still have kids in cages? They're nicer cages, but they're still cages.
Right.
There is, I mean,
On the
we're
other hand, how
probably
much can you accomplish in 100 days? I mean, he's done.
he's did a damn good job. It's just there are things where and it's hard to say if it's him or not, or if it's just this is the nature of the beast and his hands are tied. Sometimes it's hard to say. I mean, look at Obama with um, Guantanamo,
Right.
with Gitmo. I mean, that it's still there. That
Right.
was one of the things. He was like, "That's it. He's closing that down," and it's still there. So I mean, there were some times that things just don't work out the way they want, and he should come out and say that. I don't think there's any shame in that. But none of them ever do. They never come out and say it. But if that's the case, then he should say it. But he is better than I expected.
What do you think, Brian?
I'd just say that after the Trump legacy, I'd say actually being presidential is going to naturally tend towards producing a better president than you're going to expect to follow, especially given many of the observations made concerning
I mean, Joe Biden had like a
corporate
really
influence.
long history of, like, for example, the crime bill in the 90s and whatever, which he's taken a lot of heat for. And a lot of the problems that are institutionally like revealing themselves now can be kind of traced back to that crime bill, for example. And I think he gets a lot of slack for that. I think he gets given a lot of leeway for that because he doesn't seem to be the same person now. What do you think, Joe?
So two things. One, well, I'll say I had a higher opinion than most of the panel did before him starting in the first place. So, so actually, for me, the bar for him to beat my expectations are actually harder because I did expect things from him. You guys didn't really expect anything from him, so anything he does is beating your expectations, right? I did expect things from him, and he's actually beat those expectations. And I'll actually correct you; it's not been 100 days; it's been 87 days. And that's,
I was rounding up, mate.
Well, no, I know, but that's what I'm saying. Even so of course there's things left to do. I mean, it would be beyond monumental. I've been here for 100 days, and I fixed it all. It's all done. I mean, of course that's never going to happen. There's still some major things to work on. Basically, he made certain things the priority. People can argue whether those things should or should not have been the priorities. But those are all things that I can't really see anything that he's done that he shouldn't have done, that didn't need to get done. The only real legitimate, for at least in the left, obviously the right, they're going to hate everything he does. But from the left, or I should say the most salient argument would be if somebody wants to say that his priorities should be different. Okay. But I think that he was always more progressive than the so-called progressives in our country gave him credit for. because they're looking at, I mean, it's hard when you're out there and you've been there for 50, 60 years, whatever, you got this long record that people can look at. And so people, I mean, how many times people were like, oh, in 1972, he said it. Well, fuck, I was 4 years old. Not even, yeah. And so if he said something, so of course he said some dipshit, stupid things in 72. Most people did. If we look at what most people did in 1972, it's appalling. But I'm surprised at the speed actually that things are going on. So when people say, well, there's still things to do. Well, of course there is. I'm surprised he's accomplished as much as he has. And what I think is really encouraging is that one of the next big things is that infrastructure bill that Trump promised forever and never happened. And it actually has 80+% support. So even a lot of Republicans are for it, which tells me it's going to happen one way or another, because even Republicans can't hold back that tide.
Right. Fair enough. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I'm looking at the vaccine rollout right now, and it's going pretty well. And I don't know if him setting a goal of 100 million shots given was something that I don't know, like the goals that he has. I don't know if he was undershooting it so that he would overachieve. You know what I'm saying? As a political ploy. But I have a fairly big confidence that if he didn't win that election, we would not be anywhere near where we are right now. The vaccine rollout plan that the previous administration has was pretty much non-existent.
Right.
And half of that political party that was in power just didn't even really care to vaccinate us. So I'm really happy with that.
Right.
I have this memory of his first week in office, then his second week in office, and remembering like, well, he said he's going to do a whole bunch of things on day one. He did finally get around to them in like the first month, but there were logistics involved. But he has done a lot of the things that he did say he would do.
Sure.
And a lot of that was just repealing a lot of junk from the previous administration. Starting with the Muslim travel ban stuff, just writing executive orders to undo executive orders from the previous administration.
Right. I think all that stuff was really good, especially like the Muslim ban was an urgent one. And I'm really glad that was one of the things he did accomplish on day one. I just also want to agree with what Kazum said a minute ago about the whole warmongering thing. I mean, I was not keen on when Biden bombed Syria. And, I don't really want to go down a rabbit hole too much, but I'm not keen on America bombing any place, unless they bombed us first. And I just don't really see that happening in the world. So I really wish we'd stop bombing places. That's where my head is at. And to the degree that, Biden's now announced he wants to get out of Afghanistan by September 11th of this year. And whilst I am absolutely for that policy 100%, because I've been saying the same thing for about 16 years now, we don't really belong there because, we can't really change what's going on the ground to any lasting degree. But anyway, I'm grateful that they're coming out. If that actually turns out to happen, we'll still have to see, because I've heard this fucking song before. Trump said he was going to get out of Afghanistan twice, as you might recall. Most recently, I think in September of last year, he was saying that he wanted to get out of Afghanistan. And then all the pundits on the left-wing media were like, oh, no, that would be irresponsible to give a timetable and blah, blah, blah. And the minute Biden announced the exact same thing, like 6 months later, and all of a sudden it's the best decision in the world. And I agree it's good to get out of Afghanistan, but I find it very irritating that the very same pundits I saw on TV 6 months ago saying about Trump wanting to get out are now saying it's a great thing that Biden wants to get out.
It's not the same though.
It's not exactly the same. However,
like there was Trump was leaving our allies in a lurch, and he didn't have any real plan, and there was no real timetable, and he was just kind of screwing over our allies.
I think he would just said it's for the fucking headlines, Rob. I don't think.
Well, probably, Probably, but I mean, his words had consequences. Now, Biden, on the other hand, this is a non-conditional. We're basically throwing up our hands and saying we're not going to achieve what we set out to achieve, so it's time to go home. And I think those are very different things. But go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to support what Rob was saying for that, exactly that. Yeah, there's a huge difference. Even if Trump was sincere, it's hard to tell with him because he would say something and then go back on it, hours later. He might have actually meant it when he said it. But yeah, we know how we left the Kurdish regions in northern Iraq and in Syria in a disarray. We just packed up our shit and just drove away like in a matter of hours. And like Rob said, left our allies in a lurch, put them in a very bad way, and a lot of them got attacked and killed. There was no plan. So yeah, leaving in a disorganized, grabastic withdrawal versus some sort of a planned with a strategy to it. In fact, one of the things I was looking at is apparently what Biden's trying to do is trying to find some other regional player who doesn't have as much skin in the game as the people on the ground to actually go in and take our place.
What I see happening in that situation, unfortunately, is probably China taking our place. They will strengthen their trade routes, and I'm okay with China being prosperous. I understand that they have some human rights violations from our perspective, but I do believe that everyone on the planet deserves to have a job and be prosperous from their job and all that. But I see the right wing response to us leaving Afghanistan as being, well, what if China steps in and gets better trade routes? And I'm like, well, then they'll have better trade. Oh my goodness, it's not like for the U.S. to succeed, China has to fail. We can all have bounty. We can all prosper. But I know that they're probably thinking that Joe Biden's in bed with China because his son's laptop fell into their hands and stuff like that. I give a shit about China prospering. If they do, fine. We can do good on our own, ourselves, and concentrate on our own little trade routes on our side of the planet.
Chinese prosperity concerns aside, the elephant in the room here is that the Taliban is posed, has superior forces, and is posed to step in once NATO and the US pull out. And given the substantial investment in boots on the ground that you have, by withdrawing, you're effectively forcing other peacekeepers out of the region.
The only counter argument I can make is you can't have a war that never ends. And as far as I'm concerned, whatever military objectives they sought to achieve, which Joe Biden was mentioning the other day when he was announcing his policy to pull out, those objectives seem to me to have been met at least 10 years ago. So that really fucking annoys me. What were you going to say, Joe?
Can we boot Republicans for advocating genocide?
No, I'm not going to boot Republicans this time. I don't think he's advocating genocide. He's just trolling, and I'm not going to.
We can just continue. We can continue taking turns telling him to fuck himself.
Yeah, he's like, he's basically saying we should bomb fundamentalist Islam, which to him is every Muslim in the world. So I want to.
He's fundamentally a dipshit. So
an evil dipshit at that.
I'm going to say that bombing any part of the Muslim world is not going to make them any less radical. Yeah. But Elon Musk's satellites offering them internet access and porn, that might do it. Just saying.
That's actually, whether you guessed or not, that's actually more true than false. It's the same with stand-up comedy, for example. If stand-up comedy has a chance to thrive and satirical cartoons are allowed to thrive, it's amazing how much impact that can actually have on the political discourse.
Yeah.
And to that point, this is what bothers me sometimes about our foreign policy. It's just many things, but one of them particularly. We were okay with that idea with the Soviets. We said, okay, it was basically cultural overthrow. It wasn't, well, we didn't end up using our aircraft carriers and surface air missiles and any of that shit. It was cultural overthrow. They got a taste of the West and they're like, oh wow, this is pretty good. But yet we didn't do that for like almost 60 years with Cuba, because somehow doing the same stupid shit that didn't work the previous 59 years that didn't work somehow was going to work next year. And then now with the Islamic world, like I totally agree. Because if you look in the secular, well, at least or the more secular Muslim states versus the theocratic ones, the fundamentalists are primarily in the ones that are theocratic. Now, unfortunately, Turkey's becoming more theocratic, and that's a big problem because they used to be very secular and they didn't have much anything in the way of radicalization. But some of the other countries, not counting Saudi Arabia on the Arabian Peninsula, are way more open. And because basically when people are happy, they tend not to be fundamentalists.
Right.
I just asking the question here. If access to Pepsi, Coke, McDonald's, and Levi jeans isn't enough for the Muslim world, then, as it was to bring down the Soviet world, then what do you think the free
See,
market could offer them?
my opinion here, the problem with American culture and the Muslim world is kind of what Joe was saying. The Muslim world is kind of split into two camps, right? The more secular and the more fundamentalist. A lot of those people, a lot of the fundamentalist people, a lot of Muslims are really disgusted by America and American culture. Not only our foreign policy, but just the way that we live our lives. We know someone who became a Muslim who often once he pissed off enough people, he was pretty open about his own views about his own country, which was the U.S., and saying that our idea of freedom is actually really kind of found to be really immoral in the Muslim world, and that our ideas on freedom are really twisted. So some of the Muslim world would become even more angry if we tried to export more America to them.
Well, no, see, that's the thing, though. What these guys were talking about wasn't exporting it, because exporting it really has more of an aggressive tone to it, and that's generally how. Well, when we've exported things, it has been very aggressive. But like, if you just simply make it available to them where they actually have access to it on their own, you're going to find that a lot of people will, because it's hey, like
Creeping America.
creeping America.
Creeping America.
Well, look at Iran now. I mean, yeah, they still have a problem with the mullahs and everything, but the average everyday person in Iran is not a fundamentalist Muslim anymore. They're just not. Their leadership is, but that hold is slipping, and they're getting people that are.
I mean, but they
less,
have a
I'll say.
they have a secular history, though. I mean,
Right.
I mean, it wasn't. Yes, it was a long time ago, but it wasn't in the grand scheme of things. It wasn't that long ago. They were a very Western style country. So,
well, the thing, if you think about it, though, most of the Muslim world did, because they during the Ottoman Empire, it was not fundamental. It was, for the most part, not fundamentalist. The fundamentalists that we see now, this is something that only started really 120 years ago. Wahhabism and that kind of stuff is only really 120, 130 years old. So they all had a history of more secular or less religious, less theocratic rule, and it's something that actually came later.
There's also something else about the Muslim world that is worth observing on, and that is the intersect or intersecular violence between the different branches of Islam. It's something that Christianity went through. It's something that I think most schismed religions go through. It's part of the mechanism of secularization.
It's their own version of the Troubles.
It kind of is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of is. When it comes to the phrase, I have a problem, and I know this is being like overly politically correct. I don't give a shit, really, but it is what it is. But I mean, the phrase "the Muslim world" I find just like hugely problematic for the simple fact that, I mean, considering there's like 44 Muslim countries that are Muslim majority countries, and Muslims in a lot more countries than that. I mean, the Muslim world, it's just such a nebulous.
Would you be offended?
It implies a level of
Christian world?
it implies a concentration of belief which doesn't really exist, because like from Western Africa to Indonesia, you've got 20 different cultures which are historically and culturally just completely different. You know what I mean? And that has nothing to do with their religion. That's culture.
The only counter argument that I can think of, to quote your words back at you, Paul, is that it's geographically descriptive,
Right.
as would be the Greek or Roman world.
Well, and also, I would say in all those countries, however secular or theocratic they are, they're all dealing with a lot of the same issues for the same reason. And it really does come to be, how does Islam fit into their particular culture? How theocratic is their version, is their culture, and how and their version of Islam? And that's why there is such this intersector between sects of and there's also that thing of the secular.
Okay,
Muslim,
so between sex is usually a cigarette.
I just what were you going to say? Sorry, Kazum was trying to say something. I want to let him get in before Brian jumps in.
Okay.
Oh, I was just going to say, how do you feel if someone says the Christian world?
I feel it's equally problematic in the sense that, like, what's Christian about it, for one thing, and then like there's the Catholic Christian world, which is most of the Christian world, and then so yeah, I don't know. I think it's, again, it doesn't really describe very much to me other than people have Bibles.
Fair enough.
I actually see them. I see them differently. When somebody says to me the Muslim world, I think just geographically descriptive. That's what I think of. If somebody says to me the Christian world, I wouldn't think of a place. I wouldn't think of I would think more of a system of thought would be the Christian world, and it would center around belief. So there wouldn't be any borders to it. That's how I would perceive those two different.
Yeah, when I hear it, I think the belief. I think in the so I guess it's yeah.
To bolster the geographically distinct descriptive notion, there's also a distinction between politics and culture, because Islamic culture itself, when it comes to the arts and other elements of the culture, is very ancient and very diverse and very, very beautiful, as somebody pointed out Marcus pointed out. But politically, you can also make a distinction between those where you have Islamic theocracy in power, and those where, like the Church of England, although the nominated religion, doesn't actually take a great deal of political
power.
What's the word? Yeah, power, interaction, activity.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was feeling too. That the Christian world is not a geographic center. It's the thought, and so it kind of exists all over the planet. But it's the collective mind of the swath of Christianity, such as it is. But the thing is that in Islam there are theocratic countries, that are Muslim, and so like Turkey is predominantly Muslim. I don't know if it's actually. It's not in the law of the country, although it is becoming more theocratic. And And that's why very often when people talk about the Muslim world, they don't usually talk about Turkey. Actually, they're usually not talking about Turkey. They're talking about mostly the Arab republics, Indonesia, anywhere where Islam is written into the law, and that there's some level of theoretic control over the government.
I asked a friend of mine who was Turkish once. I said, what sort of percentage of Turkish people are Muslim? And he said 98%.
Right. Right.
Well, you got a similar situation in places like Albania and Kosovo, and stretching up into southern Europe. So Islam is as what's the word, intertwined geographically as Christianity and most other faiths and non-faiths, or rather. I know it's a diversion, temporary, but yeah, non-faiths in the plural seems a bit stupid to me.
Yeah, you probably just say it. Yeah, it's probably singular would be more accurate.
I like what Zoom said here in the chat here. He said, when I hear the Muslim world, I think of beliefs and ideas. When I hear Muslim countries, I think of the geography. I think that's an interesting distinction.
That's cool.
And it's a fair point.
I can live with that.
Well made.
Well, the other thing too, though, and when like disgusting, horrible, racist pieces of shit like Republicans, when they say radicalism, they literally do mean almost every Muslim, and that's a big problem. There is radical Islam. It does exist, and it is a problem. And actually, it's more of a problem for the rest of Islam than it is for the rest of us, because as we've talked about, there's a lot of conflicts within the Muslim world, which is where it's appropriate to think of it in terms of the belief. But like my cousins, they live. I have some cousins that are live nearby. They got a bistro. Yeah, they're not strapping bombs to themselves and killing anybody.
I got a problem with this whole thing. I mean, these conversations have a different flavor in 2021 as they did to say 2010, for example, when there's still a lot of people bitching about radical Muslims and all this shit. The South Park versus Islam video that Thunderfoot did, for example, caused a huge split. In what used to be called the atheist community. Anyway, but where I'm coming from with this is I find it impossible to sustain a conversation about radical Islam when I'm sitting in a country where people are getting blown away in the supermarket, not 5 miles from where I'm sitting. There are radical people in my country. That's not just the insurrectionists, although it definitely includes those people as well. And people who agree with that sort of mentality that, we need to maintain some sort of white supremacy. And the thing about white supremacy that pisses me off the most about the whole underpin of the system is it basically admits that it sucks to be a minority in America. And so their whole concern is not to become a minority in America. So you're basically admitting that it sucks to be a minority. So to me, the only solution is to make it not suck to be a minority. And that way it won't matter if your group of people becomes the minority.
Well,
how do you feel?
No, go ahead, kids.
How do you feel about Tucker Carlson trying to weave around his the whole great replacement theory crap?
I think it's outrageous.
Have you heard about it?
Be taken off the fucking air immediately and flogged with fucking something non-lethal.
How did he try and weave it?
Well, he tries to say, well, I wouldn't. It's hard to explain. He tries to say he thinks that if he explains it, it doesn't matter what the name of it is. If he explains it, it's a good position, and therefore it's okay because he doesn't call it the great replacement theory. He calls it something else.
Right.
Even though
but he doesn't. It's weird, man. It's weird. You should check out footage of him trying to weave around it.
Tucker Carlson is a white supremacist. I mean, It's just that simple.
Straight up.
Well, and to your point, Paul, the thing that I find, well, if it wasn't so tragic and dangerous, I'd find it funny. But the same people that we know are white supremacists and support white supremacy, they argue that they are not, and it doesn't exist, but yet they're petrified of being a minority. Why? Because they're afraid that minorities will do to them to what is being done to minorities now, which which is a tacit admission in their own brain
Right.
that white supremacy does exist, because otherwise you wouldn't have to worry about that shit.
Right. What makes me the most furious is the people that refuse to see it. Do you guys know who Barry Weiss is, the journalist? She's she's on Bill Maher quite a lot, and Bill Maher really likes her because she's like all sort of like anti wokeness, but all that kind of shit, you know. And
Bill Maher's a dipshit.
yeah. Bill Maher can tell some funny jokes, but politically he's way off the fucking rails as far as I'm concerned. Real quick, Brian. So Barry Weiss posted a tweet of a letter that she was lauding from a parent to some private school where you can send your kids to school for $57,000 a year. Okay. And anyways, and he was complaining about the wokeness of the school's policy and about and 3 times in the letter, and it's quite a lengthy letter. He not only wrote it to the school board, but he forwarded it to every parent who had children at the school, so that everybody's in the conversation on the CC, right? Anyway, 3 times in the fucking letter, he refers to the blacks, not black people, not black Americans, not African Americans, the blacks. And this is the level of awareness that this person, who's clearly very well educated and articulate, if you read his letter, you know, and obviously wealthy if he's got a kid or 2 kids going to school that cost 57 grand a piece. But complaining about, he said, I'll give you an example of how bad it was. He said that institutional racism, properly understood, is segregation in schools and in society. It's apartheid, basically. That's institutional racism. Anything else isn't. How do you get past that mindset?
Well, the irony is all someone has to point, well, not that he would listen, but if all someone would have to point out is the various studies that show bias in banking, housing, employment, and in the criminal justice system. Oh, and the medical system for that matter. So yeah, motherfucker, apartheid exists. It's not as stark and written into the law, but culturally they're still there.
Right. Why can't they see it, Joe?
Oh, because they don't want to. Because here's the thing: to say that to recognize that it's there when you're not doing anything about it, and actually trying to stop the people who are, is to admit that you actually support it. And even people, there's a lot of people who they'll say up and down, we're all equal, blah blah blah. They'll say all the right words if you push them on it, but at the end of the day, they're perfectly fine with how things are. They don't want to believe, they don't want anybody to believe that they're supporting something that is harmful to a segment of the population, because they want to sound noble, but they're not noble. They're bigots.
Well, I think a lot of people genuinely don't see it. They don't understand it. And that's, I mean, you got to take that into consideration too.
Well, yeah, because they don't want to, because it gets explained. I don't know how many times I've explained. I've seen other people explain this shit to people, and all they do is get defensive and argue. And the thing is that gets me about it. It's like, well, look, if I get confronted, look, we all have biases, whether we want to admit it or not. We have biases, but it's what do you do when you're confronted with that bias? So to me, they're so worried about being called a racist. It's like, well, if I'm really concerned about that, and someone confronts me with something that might be racist, even if I didn't accept it right away, I'd at least examine it and try to see, well, what are they saying and why are they saying it? But they don't. They basically do everything they can to try to draw fire away from themselves or do whataboutism and all this kind of shit. This is someone who's entrenched in a position because they think because they're not standing on the corner and yelling the N-word at somebody, that they're not doing it, causing any harm.
In order to, in an attempt to answer the why can't they see it, Anita Sarkeesian did actually make one very good point, and that was observing the effects of lensing. When you look through a particular lens, everything that you will see will be affected by that lens. For example, if you're wearing a blue lens, purple is going to look predominantly one thing. If you're wearing a red lens, it will look predominantly the opposite of that when it comes to the blue-red mix. It's the same with political lensing as well. if you see yourself or if you see the world in a particular way, then everything that you perceive about that world will be affected by that political lens. It's just the natural way that our brains work with the way we perceive things.
Which reminds me of the people's who are refusing to think of when Dante got shot by the police officer the other day. They're refusing to accept that it could possibly have been accidental because we've heard this song before, for one thing. And like you say, they can't help but see it that way because, I mean, I frankly, as I said earlier, I think in court you can't prove anything higher than negligence. That's just the way court works. Reasonable doubt. Whatever. But I think there's a strong argument to say that if she didn't do it intentionally with intention, then she did it with malice of apathy. That's my opinion. I just want to say to Kazum's point earlier. No one's more blind, Kazum, than the person who refuses to look, and you might say, oh, you're presenting people with this argument or this evidence or these statistics or whatever, but it's not doing to them what it does to you because you're open to it and they're not. It's as simple as that.
Right. Well, and so go ahead, because
I was just also I guess you make a point about people not wanting to see it. It's just that it's like coming up to someone and saying, "Hey, by the way, the world is shit, and if you don't agree, then I'm going to call you this negative name." And so I don't know.
Right, but again, how you respond to that. So do you say, well, I don't want to? If your response is, I don't want to accept what you're telling me, versus I want to understand why you're saying it. I don't think you're right, but I want to understand why you're saying it, is a different response than saying, no, it's not happening and go fuck yourself.
Well, this is where the lensing comes in, because if you are truly seeing the world through that lens and, your perception of events is colored by that lens, then first off, before you can even, make that first step that you suggest, Joe, of examining why someone is saying to me what they are saying. So maybe I need to do a little bit of introspection. Before that can occur, you need to be able to see that there is a potential flaw in your perception. And until that moment happens, then you are going to defend your position with whatever chemistry your brain throws at it. So
But see, that's the nature of skepticism, though, is being willing to accept that. Now again, I'll defend if I think I'm right. Yeah, well, you've seen me argue. If I think I'm right,
yeah.
I'll be vociferous. However, I still am. If someone presents the right information to me, I'm still prepared to believe or to accept that I might have been wrong. I mean, I look at. I was here.
Well, not necessarily wrong, but that the other person is actually making a good faith argument for their position,
right.
Even if you disagree with it.
Right, and that's the thing. I'll go to sexism instead of racism just for a moment. I look at how I am now and how I was 25, 30 years ago. I would say that my actions and thoughts and deeds back then were substantially more sexist then than they are now. Not because I believed in my head that women were inferior, but I grew up in a culture that treated women as inferior and taught me a lot of bullshit things to believe.
Well, that's just normal. That was normal then.
That was normal, including
that was the accepted lens,
and including like I was brought up with this idea to revere women, put them up on a pedestal. But of course, that's just objectification. It's still sexist. So it took a long time. And actually it was interaction with feminists who made me see, oh, wait a minute. Oh, you know what? That nice guy bullshit, that's not so nice. That, you're not being better to women. You're not hitting them and doing horrible things directly to them, but you're still putting them as lesser in some way. They're an object and not a person. And so I had to change, but I had to be willing to say, hey, I don't want to hurt people. So if someone tells me that I'm hurting them in some way, I have to stop and say, well, why do they think I'm hurting? What about my thing is hurting them? And at a certain angle, like with trans people, it took me longer to internalize that in my brain. However, I learned I used to be against gay marriage, same sex marriage, and I realized that position was hurtful to people. So when it came to trans issues, as I was still trying to process and understand it, I realized, you know what? I don't actually have to understand them to understand they're telling me that these attitudes are hurtful. And so, okay, I'll back off and try to. While I examine that thing, I'm going to change my behavior proactively to avoid potentially hurting people while I do more discovery.
Rob, you look like you're itching to say something.
I'm eating White Castles, man.
Right.
I was just gonna
What are
joke and
they?
say a couple of weeks ago I showed Joe my boobs.
They were very nice.
Yeah,
I'm a boob fan.
Agent of Doubt actually saw two, but we didn't know he was watching from the outside.
That's pretty funny. I just wanted, Joe, you the thought experiment. I know the term is like not comfortable, but we're going to have a little thought experiment now. We'll start with Michael and work our way around clockwise. Okay.
Okay.
If you could go back and tell yourself at the age of 21 one fact about the future, about your life, what would you tell yourself?
The most important thing I could have heard then was that no job was going to keep me for a lifelong career, and that I should follow my own path and not put my fate in the hands of an employer. When I was 21, shortly thereafter is when I was declared disabled that while I was still in the service, and then I had to discharge as such. And then
Right.
After that couple years of working for GE, I got sold down the river, and my whole electronics lab got sold to Davis Initech and then to Cypress. And yeah, just learn what you need to know, not what your employer wants you to know. Live your life the way that you want to live it, not the way that you think your employer wants to live it. Because I wasted a lot of years investing time in places that I could have just followed my own path.
But
Joe,
Oh, you're going clockwise. I thought you were going counterclockwise. I would tell me not to put my self-worth and self-esteem and self-love in the hands of other people. That for a long time, I used to like terribly need the validation of others to have any sense of self-worth. And of course, when you do that and with people who don't have your best interest at heart, then you're not their friend, you're a mark. And you set yourself up for some pretty heartbreaking moments. And it took a while to realize that, you're the only person that for a fact you're going to be with for the rest of your life. So you have to find your self-worth and your value in yourself. And no one else can give it to you. I mean, they can validate you, but even then, that only goes so far.
How do you think you would have listened to yourself? I mean, if you came back to yourself and if you could like walk through a portal, right, and then see yourself and have this conversation, do you think you would have believed yourself?
Well, I'm laughing only because years ago on a forum somewhere, we had a conversation about pretty much this. Although I might have given a different answer at that time. And I had said, somebody questioned that, well, I don't know if I would listen to me if I went back in time. And I said, I know that if I know me, and I know that if I went back in time and I saw the future me come back, I would listen to what I had to say. And there's the way I worded it that made them laugh. I think that I probably would tell them that, or tell me that things didn't get better until I accepted that fact.
Right.
And that, hey, we did make it, we still have problems and we still struggle for things, but hey, you're going to do really well. And if you internalize this sooner, man, you'll run this fucking planet.
What about you, Brian?
Um, I'd have to shift the age to a 30-year-old me. But
Okay, why that particular age?
because the 21-year-old me was vehemently against becoming a parent.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, the advice that I would give the younger me is to trust my instincts, because your relationship with your son will survive the decisions you make. The other thing that I would tell myself is, be wary of pushing yourself, because ME. That's the only thing that I can think of that I would actually find valuable to a younger me.
Hmm. What about you, Rob?
Be yourself, because you can't be anybody else.
Rob, you've been like 5 different people since I've known you.
I know.
You've been 2 different people tonight.
Oh, that's funny.
Mine would be probably my mid someone. What I'd want to tell myself in my mid-20s would be to be happy with the body that you have. Don't try to change it for a fetish. Don't try to change it for the bear community. Don't try to, just be happy with what you got. Be happy with that, and because that whole thing had led me down a road that messed up multiple parts of my life. I ruined my life with that. Ruined it. So yes, I would tell myself, and I would hope that I'd be able to recognize that it's actually me, older, and I'd freak out over that, and I'd know that I'd be telling the truth. So
Wow. For me, I'm on the same page you're on, Joe. I know for sure that if I knew it was me that came back through a portal, and I recognized for sure that that was definitely me, I would definitely listen to what that dude said. And what I'd go back and say, and I'm not sure if I'd say this to myself at 21 or maybe 16, but I'd say, look, Paul, you're going to get everything you want in life, but you're going to get nothing the way you want it. And that's a bit cryptic, but that's kind of how my life's worked out. I've been super privileged. I've been so happy for so much of my life, but I've also been dirt poor for most of my life. And, I didn't raise my kids the way I might have liked to because of that. And, there's plenty of room for regret if I was that kind of person. But I've also been blessed because I've been happy most of the time. I've got my health, and the people I care about also have theirs.
The last thing that, just as I'm leaving, ciao. Been a great discussion as always.
Thanks for
But
stopping by.
on that note, the other thing that I might tell a younger me is, remember the word Bitcoin and go all in.
Yeah.
And on that night,
Thank you,
everybody.
Brian.
Good night, man.
Yeah, if I could tell myself a second thing, I would tell myself to not be afraid to trust myself more. Because I actually had that, that moment that Brian talked about with Bitcoin. I had a chance back when I was maybe 25. And if I had taken a chance, I was when I was first learning how options work. If I had gone in for the play I was looking at, I would have put in about $2,000, and I would have made about $750,000 in a matter of 2 months. And that would have transformed my life in some pretty heavy duty ways.
I think if I was to have a second thing, it would be to tell myself in my at 20 or 21 or whatever, to really get a good understanding of how the business world works, because I didn't know shit. I had no idea, and that hindered me in so many ways. And if I would have really researched that, I could have probably made something a lot better with myself.
one other thing too, I think I would say is people like you if you're intelligent because you know stuff and they're impressed by that, but you can't do it like you are showing off because they really don't like that. They don't like when they feel like
What are
you're
you
making.
kidding? I got a big brain. I got the best brain. I got the biggest brain. I'm never, I mean, come on.
Well,
That works for him.
not even that. But as long as you don't make other people feel like you're trying to make them feel dumb.
Right.
Sometimes people can get threatened at the job site just by other intelligent people being around. I don't experience it that much because I work as a contractor, but back when I was in the more corporate world, I experienced it a lot. Just showing that you're intelligent can sometimes make other people really apprehensive.
Yeah. I had a lot of that when I was a kid. Not so much when I was growing up, though.
I find when that's when there's people who are maybe slightly above average, and so they're used to being one of the smarter people in the room, and then if somebody substantially smarter shows up, they feel threatened because now this person is like this person is to them what they are to everybody else, and so they're like they have a hard time with that.
I don't know what any of that is like.
It's kind of funny. I was thinking the same thing, but anyway, I don't know. When I was going through school, I was one of those kids. When I was in first grade, the teacher said, "If you know the answer to the question, raise your hand." So virtually every time they asked a question, I raised my hand, and other kids find that really annoying. And I did that all the way through school because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. Even after I comprehended that other people, were getting annoyed by it, I thought, well, I know the answer. So I thought that's what you're supposed to do. That's what we're here for, right? We're supposed to say, yeah, we know, we can move on with the lesson now. We got that. Let's move on. Right. But
or you're busting the curve.
Well, I think people thought as well, there was this term back in those days. I don't know if it still exists in school because I don't live in that world anymore, but there was this term called teacher's pet. Mm. People used to think if you raise your hand a lot, you're trying to become the teacher's pet. And I wouldn't really know what that's like either. I mean, sometimes teachers liked me, but I never kissed their butt or anything. I just raised my hand all the time. That's all. So.
Yeah, I mean,
I always had something to say every time the teacher put a question out there. I know you guys are shocked by that, right? But
well, the problem I had was, and this is stuff that teachers actually said to my grandparents when they would go for parent-teacher conferences, was that I would ask questions that they couldn't answer, and that would make them feel uneasy, and so they would get angry at me. Plus, many of them were racist, and
yikes!
Like the time I got attacked by 10 kids, but I and my grandparents ended up in the principal's office the next day until my grandmother was like, well, wait a minute, wait, you're saying that he got attacked by 10 kids? Why are we here? And he's like, well, Joey is very big, and because I've always been larger than most people around me, not just fat, but just tall and everything. And it's the only time I ever heard my grandmother curse willingly, because she usually tried to not curse in front of me, but she went off on the teacher because on the principal because as to why the fuck we were there and not the 10 kids who attacked me.
I was always very aggravating and frustrating for my teachers, and they would complain to my parents all the time. I said I was one of the smartest students that they've ever had, but I consistently failed every class, every marking period, every year. Because I had no interest in anything.
Because of why?
I had no interest in anything that they were doing. I was like one of those that I'm not just not taking.
So they could see you had a good head on your shoulders, but you just weren't doing the work. Is that it?
I just wasn't doing the work. I mean, they make you take the tests. You have to take the standardized test. And I mean, I was like college level reading and stuff in like third grade. And yeah, teachers used to bang their heads on the wall. I've been in the guidance counselor's office a million times when I was a kid, basically with them looking at me going, we don't understand what the problem is. And I'm just like,
They were
you were the problem. I'd rather be home. I don't want
they
to
were
be here. School for me was because I was different. I was small. I was scrawny. I talked funny, and I got beat up. I got beat up all the time. I got jumped on the bus at the bus stop. I was always in the nurse's office with injuries. I got beat up in the locker rooms. I got beat up in the cafeteria. I got beat up all the time. I was a kid that was always picked on. I mean,
Wow.
as young as like sixth grade, I would have guys coming up to me going, "Oh, look, it's Rob," so I spent my childhood was spent hiding. I did not want to be in school ever because it was dangerous to my safety to be in school. Um, so I cut. I went in late. I left early if I could. I didn't take part in anything. Um, but then they make you take the standardized tests, and I would ace everything. And that's the only reason why I made it from grade to grade was because I was getting the highest scores in the school.
Rob, that's the same way I went through high school, but I didn't get picked on like you did though. But in high school, I kind of got angry at school because they wanted me to do this thing called homework. And I'm like, no, fuck you. I'm here 7 hours a day and I'm only awake for 16 hours a day. So
Ain't that enough of my time?
you've already got nearly half my day from me. You're not getting more than half. That's just outrageous. So I would do whatever work I was assigned during the recess or lunch break in the library, if possible, or I would do it in class, which you're not supposed to do while they're giving a lesson. And I would hand my incomplete or finished if I could finish it at school, but I would never do it at home. And then I would ace the fucking finals. And once the one class I ever got an F in high school was called comparative government. And the irony of that is I learned more in that class than I've learned in any other high school class I ever took. Right. But I got an F in it because most classes, at least 50% of your grade was the final exam, at least 50%. Some of them were more than 50%. So if you ace the final exam, you're in there with at least a C, right? Even if you flunk all the homework, right? Anyway, so in comparative government, it was 75% homework, and you had homework twice a week. You handed in your homework on Monday, you got new homework, you handed it in on Friday, you got new homework, you had it on Monday, like that. And that's how it works. And like I handed in all that shit incomplete, and incomplete is a fail in that class. So it wasn't like you got partial credit for incomplete. If you didn't complete the work, boom. So it was the rules of that class that got me the F, which is ironic because I really, really, really learned a lot in that class, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I had a similar thing. I didn't like to do homework either for the same reason. It was like, hey, look, if I know this stuff. And so what happened is some teachers would get pissed. I remember like my Spanish teacher, senior year Spanish teacher got pissed at me because I would come into class, I didn't have my homework. And he's like, well, how are you supposed to be answering the questions? I go ahead. And he would answer me the questions. I'd answer them. I was like, well, there you go. I know the work, you know? It's funny. Actually, my chemistry teacher that I had for chemistry 1 and 2, he gave me a B the final marking period. Not that I was getting, pretty much hundreds on all the tests and everything, but he was hoping to motivate me because he said, well, when you get to college, you're going to have to do work. He's just not going to be as easy as high school. Cause I never did any work in high school. But it didn't because I went to school the first semester of college. I partied and hung out, and I still got a 3.06 was my first GPA. So I'm like, oh, this is easy. And then, of course, then it got harder afterward. But
I figured out when I was pretty young. I figured out that school was bullshit. That the public school system in this country is completely fucked and absolute bullshit, and nothing ever really made sense. Like it was like the homework. I never did any of the homework, and the reasoning was for me why I didn't do the homework was the same as you. I already know the work. If the goal is for me to learn a thing, and I already know the thing, I don't have to do the homework. It doesn't make any sense because I'm not learning anything by doing the homework. It's just a waste of my time. So, I mean, I was in like 8th grade and I was already thinking that the entire purpose of school, public school in America, is to learn how to obey the bell. That's what you do. That's what they're teaching you. They're teaching you how to clock in and how to clock out and how to fill the time in between with whatever you're told to do. So that's why one of the reasons I refuse to take homework home. I just refused because
Well, I was such an outcast at school because most people like the social aspect of school and hate the classwork. I was the other way around. I liked the classwork and I hated the whole social side of school. You know, I had like
I
one,
hated the whole thing, all of it. It
yeah,
was
I had
just
like one friend in high school, you know, maybe two.
Yeah. See, I had appeal. I mean, I had a core of friends that I always said that we were the misfits. Like, you know, there's in any school, there's like the jocks, and then there's the preppies, and then there's the burnouts, and there's the shop guys, and everything. And all the people that were my closest friends, we kind of fit in those groups, but we didn't totally fit in any of them. And some of us were across 2 or 3 groups. So that's why we kind of gravitating together, because we were like the misfit group. So it's funny though. I remember I went to a party, like a graduation party, high school graduation, and everybody was like shocked to see me. And I'm like, well, why are you shocked? And they're like, well, we thought you just stayed home and studied. And I'm like, I studied like 6 hours the whole time I was in high school. It's like, you guys just assumed that I didn't like to have fun, so you didn't invite me to shit. So, you know, so that's why when I got to college, I was determined to make sure people knew that I like to have fun. And I went a bit overboard.
What's your degree in, Joe?
Chemical engineering.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a Bachelor of Engineering. There's only there's like 5 schools in the country. Most people who have an engineering degree have a Bachelor of Science in Engineering. I have a Bachelor of Engineering.
All right.
So I will say, in full disclosure here, full transparency, I do regret not taking school more seriously and doing what I had to do. Because as fucked up and as much of a waste of time, most of it is, and how it's really not what they tell you it is. The outside world, outside of school, puts a lot of value on it. And I wish I had it, but like I said, I mean, I just at the time was just like, I already know all this. Why am I? But whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah, you can't change the past, you know.
I mean, the thing is, I found value, like maybe not before high school. Once I got to high school, I found value in it. But like you said, the stuff like homework is like, well, for the same reason that this is not something that should be part of my grade. That's should be there to help me learn if I'm having trouble learning it. And if I can just sit there and listen to the teacher and understand it, or read it on my own or whatever. I actually had a problem with that in college once. In one of my classes, I remember I got to class late, which was part of the course for me, and the teacher was giving back tests, and the teacher was pissed at me because I got the highest grade in the class and I didn't show up for any of his lectures. So he literally said, you got the highest grade in the class. You didn't come to my lectures. Don't do that again. And I'm like, well, clearly I didn't need your lectures. And based on the results of everybody else, your lectures might have hurt.
Snap.
So what ended up happening was there was a different class that another class that I ended up, the teacher was going to fail me. I had a high average in the class. I had like a B average, but he decided that most of the way through the term, mind you, that because the freshmen, they were starting to count attendance and homeworks for class, that he decided this 3 weeks before the end of the semester, that he was going to count attendance and homework. And of course, since I hadn't done any of that, I went from like a high B average to failing, or I was about to fail the class, so I dropped it. So when I had to retake it, because that class, that was the last time they had that specific class, and because they reworked the curriculum. So I ended up with that first teacher who I got the highest grade, and he was pissed at me. So I had to take his class again. And so I went to him at the beginning of the semester because I had a scheduling conflict, because I had to take my full load, which at my school was like, 17 credits, plus I had to take an extra 3 credit class. So I was running 20 credits. And I told him flat out, I said, look, I'm overloaded. Your class conflicts with another class that I need. I'm not going to come to your class. I'm not going to do your homeworks. I'm going to pass the test, and you're going to pass me. Do you understand? And I got in his face, and he backed off, and yeah, he passed me because I was like, I was like, oh, I already took your class. I already passed your fucking class. You know, don't harass my shit.
Good advocating for yourself. I'd say of the stories I've heard, I identify with Rob's not being engaged by the classwork, because if you already know it, then why are you doing the rote learning? It was painful for me in high school to have to basically sit, butt time in a chair. I was in a gifted program in the sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. And then when I went to high school, there was no such thing. It was advanced placement courses, maybe, but there was no gifted program.
Right.
And, my original 4 years of high school, I had a GPA of a 1.6. And then I went to a different high school to finish off my high school education. And that was more than 4 years that it took. But that last semester that I put in at a Montessori school, I earned as many credits in that school in one semester as I did in 4 years of a traditional high school.
Wow.
I went to the Army after that, and I didn't go back to getting into the university. I was in the Army, took a couple of courses in satellite universities at military installations, but I went to the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, when I got out, and I used those courses as my GPA. If you do like 15 college courses at like the community college level or university level, they'll count your GPA from that as your admission, because a 1.6 GPA was not going to get me into a university, but they counted my existing college credits, and that was good for me because I double majored in English and psychology, and my GPA was 3.6 when I finished with University of Wisconsin. And a lot of that had to do with my sergeants while I was in the Army not letting me out of my classes to make it to class, and those classes having pop quizzes at the very beginning of the class just to catch up those people who were late.
Wow.
But I just went back to get my master's degree in the last 3 years, and I graduate on May 8th, and I will have a 4.0. And I'm the first person in my class of the cohort that I'm in to have my provisional license for mental health. And I'm teaching other people how to get it before they graduate so that there's no break in the care for their clients, because if they're in their internship as a job and then they finish their internship and don't have the provisional license, they have to wait a couple months, then those clients suffer. They don't have access to a counselor, so I'm teaching other people how to get that set up. I'm basically pulling people across the finish line. I'm like, look, fuckers, we all got to get this done. There's a lot of depression.
I was one of those kids in school that Montessori school would have made a world of difference. My entire life would be different now. Just because of the Montessori method. Public school was just no good for me. It was not a match. I mean, a lot of kids thrive. Obviously, lots and lots of kids really do thrive in public school, and they get out and they go to college and they end up doing great things.
What about your youngest two, Rob? Any plans to put them through Montessori school? Is that such thing available where you are?
Damon was already in Montessori school, but because he's a special needs kid, it was better to get him into a special needs programs. And Montessori, they claim to be good for that, but they're really not, because it's self-guided, it's self-directed, and when your self has no self-direction, it's not going to work. But I would like to eventually get him back into Montessori school because I think it would be good for him. But I do know, because of what I know about the Montessori method, that would have been, for me, it would have been like a gold mine. It would have changed everything. And unfortunately, hey, it is what it is. Can't change the past.
Yeah.
My brother followed me to the same school I went to, and he graduated at 16. I was their first student body president. They created a student government class for me, and I made their mascot the Lions, Tigers, and Bears, and my brother shortened it to the Tigers when he became the student body president.
Did I ever tell you guys I was going to be a school teacher? Um, my radio career sort of wound down in the UK. I had one radio job in the UK, and then I became painfully aware that being foreign was a serious handicap to the furtherance of my career in that country, among other handicaps that I had. And so I decided to re-educate myself, and I went to school. I got my first I got my A levels so I could get into university. And then I went to university, and I was going to get a degree in English and religious studies, and I was to become a school teacher of 8 to 11-year-olds. That was going to be my goal. But while I was away, the cat was playing, and so I found out, I had to come back, and my wife split, and I got custody of my kids, and that put an end to my college career and my aspirations about being a school teacher. But I mean, that was what I was going to be after I was a DJ. And in a way, I think I would have been a good teacher, probably, I hope. But in a way, I'm kind of glad I didn't, because the whole body piercing experience enriched my life immensely. Being a body piercer, it was a career path I never would have chosen if I was a school teacher.
Mm.
Vegas in the chat just put that public school equals daycare, and I definitely felt that way in my experience with public school. For 4 years of a traditional high school, I felt like I was just being slowed down.
Yeah, they actually approached my grandparents when I was a kid about putting me, because gifted and talented program, going to a different school and all that. And then they really didn't follow up. And sometimes I wonder, as well as I've done in life, that I really think that, I think at one of those schools, the bullying wouldn't have happened from teachers and other students. And I would have, I was just joking in the chat. I said I'd be emperor now, but I definitely, and not to put down what I've accomplished, but I think I'd be even further than I am now.
I had an adult. Sorry. I had an adult level evolution in my emotional regulation, and it had to do with my education as a counselor, because when I got my degrees in psychology and English, just my bachelor's degrees, I could have been a teacher, but I had somebody who was a friend that went before me who got a degree in English and was an English teacher in Milwaukee, and he was assaulted by one of his students. And I realized that in the situation he was in, I would have committed assault on a minor. I would not have held back. I would have gone beyond defending myself. And I realized, maybe there's a certain level of kids that I'm just not cut out to be teaching, because of the disrespect between middle schoolers and high schoolers. That age bracket of kids was just not for me. And to teach in college, you have to go one level higher, and I didn't go that one level higher for another 10 years. And now that I'm there, I realize that, I'm older, wiser, had another education and how to be a counselor, and I absolutely could restrain myself now. But when I first got my degree, I could not go into teaching, especially in the inner city. There was too much disrespect coming from kids to teachers. And I realized that about myself, and that's why I didn't go into it.
What were you going to say, Raven?
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't
The moment
matter.
is gone.
Kind of. I mean, it was just basically like, yeah. I mean, the daycare that is public school, kind of held me back. It moved too slow. I worry. My oldest Devin, he had the same problem. He had a major problem. He was reading. before he was in school. He taught himself how to read. He taught himself how to speak a little bit anyway, Japanese. Taught himself how to write music. Taught himself how to play just about any instrument he got his hands on. His brain doesn't work the same way that a lot of people's do. That public school is designed for. And he struggled through school. Is one of the smartest people I know. And he struggled through school because it just didn't move fast enough for him. Put him to sleep. And I worry about Damon and Kai if they're going to have the same issue. That's really all. If when you guys want to change the subject, I have something interesting that happened today. You guys want to hear? I mean, this is okay. So before I was with Peach, and after the ex that I've spoken about so much, Ozzy, after he and I split up, and before I was with Peach, for a brief time I was in a throuple. I had two boyfriends. They were a couple, and then they met me and they brought me into their relationship. So it was our relationship, like Amy. And it was Alfonso and Randy. And I had just gotten out of a relationship, and I was young. I mean, not like I was really young, like I was like 18 or anything, but I didn't really take a whole lot real seriously in LGBT relationships because I just had one that ended so badly. And I kind of screwed up, and I was kind of like fooled around behind their backs, and then I told them about it, and they're like, "Yeah, this ain't gonna work." But we had spent, not a long time, but not like it wasn't like like 2 or 3 days. It was we were in a relationship. And while I was with them, one of the guys, Alfonso, made this disc of it's a CD of different songs. It's a mix, like a mix tape. It's a mix CD, and it's called "Once Upon a Song." Right, and he made this, and he wrote on the disc. He wrote a message to me, and after Devin moved out a couple weeks ago, and I was setting back up the family room and my office and all of that, I was setting all this up. I found this disc, and it says, "Rob, I see so much of me in you. We love you, Alfonso and Randy." And I was like, "Oh my God!" Right? I had forgotten about this disc, and I looked them up on Facebook, and I sent Alfonso a message, and he responded just by saying hi. And I said, "You remember me?" And he said, "Yeah." He's a hairdresser. He said, "Yes." And then he said, "How's your hair doing?" I'm like, "He doesn't remember me." So I said, "You really don't remember me, do you?" And he said, "The face is familiar, but no." And I
So
was like,
who have they been in thruples with?
I was like, "Oh my God, dude. I mean, it says right here, you love me and you don't remember me." And Peach, I told Peach is like, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I'm like, "No, why are you sorry?" And she's like, "Oh, that's gotta hurt." I said, "You know what? It doesn't hurt. I mean, I'm disappointed, but I'm not hurt. I can handle it." But yeah, it was just like, holy shit. So yeah, fuck thruples.
Like it's like it's like any relationship, right? I mean, some relationships work and some don't, and some are better for certain people in the relationship than others.
I don't.
But
I'm not made of the right stuff to be part of a thruple. I am just not made of the right stuff. I have been acquainted with several polyamorous people in my life, and I admire them with bewildered awe because I am not that secure in myself as I would like to be when it comes to being able to share my passions with. I don't know. I just don't think I just don't think I'm made of the right. I'm cut from a different cloth. Simple as.
oh, I don't think I would have been able to deal with it, 20 years ago. But I think I've got different attitudes about things now. It's just in general, just about the nature of any relationship. That and So I think, like to me, I mean, I think that it can work, and I think that you really the idea that you can get your everything from one person. I think that is a tall order. If you can find it, that's awesome. But I don't know that you can find. I think it's difficult to find, everything in one person.
I think it's a mistake to look for everything in one person.
Yeah, me too. But I think, and that's the reason why I think a lot of monogamous relationships, or at least on the surface, monogamous relationships fail, is because people are expecting to have that other person be their all, and that's not really possible or fair.
Yeah, I think it's extremely unfair.
So I think it's. I think too, as you get older, it's like the idea that, being, possessive of somebody else's body. I don't care what somebody else does with their body. It's not my body. So.
I fucking care, man. I won't pretend otherwise. I fucking care. I definitely care. But I mean, you're right. Everyone's their own person and whatever. But I mean, I've just been cheated on too many times. I can't handle the idea that my partner might be with someone else. It just fucks my head up too much. Yeah. I'm just made of that. Hey, Kazoom, I don't even know. Are you in a relationship at the moment?
Oh no. But as far as relationships, I can deal with open relationships as long as people are upfront about everything.
See, for me, it would be the opposite, right? Like if I was in a relationship and I really liked the person and she wasn't like inclined to, say, have a monogamous relationship, my whole thing would be, look, man, whatever you're doing when I'm not around, I don't want to fucking hear about it. When I'm with you, you're with me, and that's it, and we're cool, and it's good. But if you're doing other stuff, I'd rather not know because it will only hurt me. That's me.
That's what Suzanne, when we first got together, that's what she said to me a long time ago. She goes, "I'm not saying you should do anything, but if you do, don't develop a conscience and tell me about it. I don't want to know." So, but we have a running joke that like I don't chase anybody, but if it chases me, I'll run that fast.
Yeah, Peach has said, multiple times that monogamy is damn near impossible, and cheating is cheating because you have to sneak, and that's why it's bad, because you have to sneak. So you shouldn't have to lie to the person that you're with. So if I was going to do anything, because I basically say all the time that we have an open relationship, but it's been rare that I've gone looking for anything outside of our relationship. Pretty rare, because I feel guilty. I feel bad. It's just like if I did that, I would feel awful. But she's just like, if you're going to, don't want to know the details. I just want to know you're doing it. I'm like, that's easy enough.
I know. I have some friends who are in the BDSM scene, and the problem that they can have if they're involved with somebody who's not, then they're not able to get that aspect of their sexuality fulfilled, and so they basically, at least the people I know, that they basically tell they're involved with somebody who's not into that. Say, look, you don't have to be, because if that's not your thing, that's not your thing, and I can't make that be your thing. It's not, but I need that thing, so you need to know that I need to fulfill that thing. And if that's not cool with you, then let's not do this. Because as long as you're okay with me getting my thing, I'll come back. I'm not going to leave you, but I gotta scratch that itch, and I think that's a reasonable approach.
Well, when you said a moment ago, Deb, about how they didn't want to know, wanted to know, but didn't want to know the details, right? For me, that's my problem. It's the opposite. I don't want to know because my mind will fill in the details. What you leave out is probably not as bad as what I will fill in. So
I think a lot of people are like that. So, like, okay, for instance, tonight, I wasn't going to be on tonight. I wasn't going to come and be on the show here, because right across the border in Pennsylvania, about an hour away from here, right up the road from where my kid bought a house, there's a gay resort, and it's called Rainbow Mountain. And this weekend is trans weekend. And they got like a whole big thing with a DJ and 2 dance floors and a bar and a pool and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, she and I talked about me going to that. I was going to go to that, and it was going to be basically the first time that I went out as Raven. It would have been like, that I'm out in public, not hiding anything, just letting my hair down, so to speak. And I decided against it. So, but tonight, it would have been. I would have been. Who knows what I would have been doing tonight if I had gone. But you know, you're muted, but I don't think you have to be not muted for me to get it.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I mean, one thing though, I do think that more and more people are at least open to, even if they don't want to get involved in a polyamorous relationship, they're more open to the concept that it's not a horrible or weird or disgusting thing. That it's just not for them, but that at least they accept that it's a valid thing, as long as the people in it are of their own free will and everybody is being honest about whatever they're doing.
How many members of a harem are really there for their own free will? I just wonder about that. You know what I mean?
Well, but it's not a harem though. I don't think.
No, I'm not saying that example. I'm using the example of an actual harem, right? You know what I mean? Seriously, example, like there's some people who are not technically Mormons, but these break off religious people who are in Utah somewhere who have like literally like 11, 12 wives or whatever, right? And most of those wives, when you see them on these TV shows, they seem intelligent, self-determined people, right? And my attitude is, as an adult, consenting adults, I'm good. Whatever you want to do, that's your thing. No one's getting hurt. But is that really true? I mean, it's not up to me whether someone gets emotionally hurt or not. That's not, you can't help that. But, when it comes to, especially when there's a religious angle, you can't get out of the whole indoctrination and how much of this is actually a free choice.
I think that.
Go ahead.
I think. I think it depends on the situation. It's like almost everything else. It's all situational. Amy, for instance, she has 2 boyfriends. Right? It's not something that she hides. They are both with her. She is with the both of them. They are not together.
No.
And they all live under the same roof. It is an interesting dynamic, and it works for them. And nobody's getting hurt, and everybody agrees. Now, some of these religious breakaway groups, or some of these women, are basically, they're like sister wives and sister slaves. Yes, obviously somebody is getting hurt in that situation. It is a different situation. So it really depends.
Well, that's the thing. I would say that not everyone who is polygamous is polyamorous. Because in the case like Rob's talking, we're talking about like sister wives and all that. I would argue that those relationships are not about loving relationships or sexuality or anything like that. They're literally part of a religious belief that you need to have 1 billion wives and 10,000 kids or whatever. And there are people within those circles who are not getting what they might want out of a relationship, but they because they're indoctrinated into it, they stay in it, even though if they're not happy with it. So you can be now you could be polygamous and be polyamorous, but I don't think. Yeah, there's definitely cases where people are polygamous and not polyamorous, and also you can be polyamorous and no one marrying anybody. Like Amy's not married to anybody.
Now, I mean, it's hard enough. It's hard enough to find one person that you connect with on all the levels that are required, you to connect with in order to have a healthy relationship in today's society. It's even harder to find more than one. But if you do, if you're able to do that, that's amazing. And I mean, there's so many benefits of having multiple people in the relationship. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think if it works for people and everybody's hip for it, I have absolutely no criticism or judgment whatsoever. I had a friend once. This is slightly off topic, but he was a bass player in a couple of different rock bands. He said because he's in 2 bands. And he said when you're in even one band, it's like having 5 girlfriends at the same time. Because that's how many relationships you're trying to sustain and arguments you might get in and everything else.
Yeah, he had a call.
Right.
And to what Rob's saying, I mean, I think one of the interesting things is how you can connect with two different people in two entirely different ways, but ways that you find profound to you. You know, it's like, okay, I want to have some level of commitment with this person because I connect with them in this way. And there's this other person I connect to in a completely different way that I don't connect with the other person with. And I also find this profound, and I want this around, and it's, you know, part of everything else that's going on. And it is, a lot of it does come down, you know, the ability to be in it or not comes into trust, and it comes into, you know, insecurity, you know, how secure or insecure everyone's involved.
Yeah, I got to tell you though, as somebody who was for a brief time a member of a throuple, and not talking about the sex at all, which is amazing, but both that's the sex and the fact that I'm not talking about it. Both things are amazing. But just like when you go to bed at night, and again, not talking about sex, to be like wrapped up with two other people at the same time to go to sleep with. And then to wake up, you know, with again, you know, his 6 arms and 6 legs, you know, just kind of all
Be a
entangled.
man sandwich.
It's absolutely amazing. I mean, and the amount of what at the time I perceived to be love, even though they don't remember me, the fuckers. But I mean, you know, it was amazing at the time, and I grew a lot because of that relationship and that situation. And I'm glad that I did it. I just, you know, wish that they fucking remembered me. So
Poor Rob. Yeah.
I feel for you, Rob. I thought my experience with my exes was horrific, but hearing yours, it sounds so much worse. All that happened with me was I logged onto Facebook, saw my ex's Facebook, and it had a whole bunch of political memes I disagreed with because her politics basically are they go with the wind of whoever she's dating.
Ah.
So whoever that guy is must be a horrible guy, you know, because she just wasn't that intelligent to begin with. Whatever her guy believes, she believes.
Wow.
And so, like, just to think that someone could be so different, and that's not just one instance. Like, I have multiple exes, and like a bunch of my friends from high school that have all gone down a really different path, philosophically, politically, religiously.
I'm
And
sorry, Michael. I got stuck on whatever he believes, she believes. I'm
Yeah.
like stuck. What's women exist that what? What? I've never met such a person, male or female, but what?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that when they get with somebody, they adopt whatever beliefs they have.
Wow. Well, it's literally with me and my gal. It's one of the only things we actually disagree about is politics and issues to do around that. Everything else we pretty much agree about, but politics definitely not.
I had
Yeah.
a little
So
bit of a similar thing. Sorry, Joe. A little bit of a similar thing tonight. Like, okay, so I went to me, Peach, and the boys. We went to my sister's house. She lives 3 doors up, and we walked there. Right. Anyway, she went there because her granddaughter is just turning 2 years old, so she was having a 2-year-old party for her. Now, my sister, I think she's an amazing woman. Her husband was from Chile, and he left when the girls were really young, and he turned out to be a piece of shit, and he got deported, and you can't come back into the country and all kinds of stuff. Right. Anyway, so she found out over the years that there's other children with his name in our same town. Um, so yeah, just bad stuff. So she raised her 2 girls on her own, and you know, it wasn't like the typical single mom stories where it's like struggling. I mean, she busted her ass, but she gave them a really good life. And her oldest went to Montclair State, and I mean, you know, she did an amazing job. And her younger daughter has a 2-year-old little girl, and basically the only man for the most part involved in their entire lives is you know, the little girl's father. and we were there tonight, and I was talking about it, and I was just saying, she's going to going to grow up to be a very strong, very independent woman, because she's being raised by a household of strong, independent women who had to get by without men. And they did a fantastic fucking job.
Mm.
Um, so I, girl, I mean, she may never call herself a feminist. Who knows? She's 2 years old, but she gonna grow up, and she's gonna be one of those girls that takes the world by the balls and laughs at it. Yeah. So anyway,
I was going to say to Michael that his ex, that his beliefs or her beliefs or his beliefs, she doesn't actually have any beliefs. She takes positions. She's a people pleaser, and she's taking positions to fit in with whatever person she's romantically attracted. But because your beliefs don't change on a whim, they might change over time because you were in, somebody made a compromise, but you're vacillating all over just based on who you're dating. You don't actually have any beliefs.
yeah, Michael, it's a psychological thing. We don't expect you to understand.
We're side-splaining.
I would say that that's largely accurate. And that's a reflection of who I was, really, in that I was actually attracted to somebody who I felt was easily manipulated, because I didn't have that self-esteem to go for a strong woman in that version of me way back when.
Oh, he just went really deep.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's some pretty amazing introspection, Mike.
And now I look at Facebook, and I don't like the earth. I want off. Let me off.
Yeah, some nights.
But your ex remembers you, right?
Yes. And in between all of her flings, she has sent me messages, but previously.
A horrifying thing to contemplate, Rob, what you say about remembering, is I'm 100% sure that I remember lots more of the women I've dated than women I've dated remember me. And that's kind of a sobering thing to contemplate.
Yeah. I think I mentioned, I actually brought this up in a video I had made as a response to a video that Rob had made a few years back. And I had a point where a few years back where I kind of looked up all the women I had been involved with one way or another, and the things that didn't work out right. And there was a part of me at one time that was like, oh, I hope they realize that Joe is an okay guy and blah blah blah. And then I realized, what? No, they don't think. Whether if they think, they probably don't think about me at all. They've moved on with their life and they're doing other things. They don't care, and that's okay. And I shouldn't worry about whether or not they think about me. It's not relevant anymore. They're gone. They're not part of my life. They're not going to be part of my life. And rather than torturing myself with the concern over something that's basically irrelevant at this point, don't hurt myself, because I could easily hurt myself with that and just really kind of, things didn't go well and they don't even care and blah blah blah. And I used to do that, but not anymore.
Just for your guys' entertainment, I decided to look at the latest meme on the account of her, and it's a Austin Powers meme. It's filled in with words, but basically he's saying, "Fear of the corona is on the decline. Switch back to racism." Switch back to racism. And so the joke is that the media is controlling us, and if it's not fear of the coronavirus, then we're going to be pumping out racism. That's not my perspective, and it's like the opposite. It's so far removed from anyone I would want to be around.
A couple of things. One, this will make some of the right wingers that are viewing kind of smile. To a certain extent, the media is trying to control us, and a lot of what's on the media is kind of sensationalized bullshit designed to get some kind of reaction. And I think if most of us don't realize that by now, We're either not paying attention or we cannot think. Um, but I mean, if you don't realize that, I don't know.
Okay,
But
so
I don't know.
the very next meme. Now, I recognize that the last people to run for president were Biden and Trump, right? Hillary memes are kind of stale, right? And to see just something that says I'm Hillary Clinton and I approve this killing, I'm like,
Get
what
over
planet
it.
do you live on where that is still relevant? And then it's like labeled Benghazi. I'm like,
well,
you're still on Benghazi?
well, see, it's funny about this. These are the same people that said that we had Trump derangement syndrome, and yet now that even Trump is gone, they're still talking about Hillary. It's like Hillary was never president, asshole. Move the
She
fuck
wasn't
on.
even running the last time.
No.
So my ex, Ozzy, when we split up, I had said to him, because I mean it was a really ugly breakup, and I was like, for years I was like devastated over this. I mean it was bad. Paul shake his head. I mean I was a mess.
Dude, I
I was in
understand.
I was in really 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 bad shape. And I mean like Peach. Oh my god. I don't know what my life would be like if it wasn't for Peach. Anyway, but one of the things I said to him while we were like going through this whole process is, you're making a mistake. You know, you're making a mistake, and I'm the one that has to pay for it. Number one. And number two, one day you will realize that you made a mistake. And then what? Okay. And that was in 2007. All right, 2007, early 2008. A couple of months ago, he sent me a message, and we chatted a bit through Messenger, and he basically, said he apologized to me, and he said that he made a mistake. And it's just like, I know. I've always known. It is what it is. I mean, what can we do? It is what it is.
Now,
Everything has changed.
now isn't Ozzy? Isn't he the one that you made the video about that I made the response to?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember when he left and he didn't say goodbye or say anything to you, and you were really hurting. And that's when I said the story I just related. I basically said that to Rob, like, don't let other people hurt you like that, because they don't matter, and whether they think you about you or not is not relevant. And if you're and so if you try to put yourself back in that and try to relive that relationship, it's just hard.
We were together for 9 years. And then a few years after we split up, he left the country. He moved to Puerto Rico, and didn't say goodbye. And it was just like, when I found out a couple of months after he moved, I found out that he moved, and I was just like, okay, I get that we weren't together, but we raised children together. I wasn't even worth a goodbye. I mean, it hurt. It hurt.
I feel that.
But I mean, it's. I was spent, and the reason that it hurt is I was at that time still investing way too much emotion into him. And like obviously now I'm just like, whatever. I mean, whatever, dude, whatever. So now when he, contacts me and telling me that he's sorry and that he made a mistake, it's just like, hey, fuck you, man. What are you gonna do? Yeah, I told you this. We could have avoided a lot of pain, motherfucker. We just had to listen to me.
But on the flip side, if he hadn't have done that, you wouldn't have got with Peach. You wouldn't have.
I mean, it's amazing the way life works, right?
Right.
That's what I wish that for those of you who remember Northern Vox Media, when things in his relationship went south and he was asking me like, is this what relationships are? And I said, well, sometimes, but it's not always. It can be good. I still wish that I could have reached him, because to that, just because this relationship ended badly doesn't mean that they're all going to go that way.
I just wanted to, real quick, I just wanted to say, fuck you, Republicans.
What did you do this time?
Fuck.
Yeah. Oh man.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that and I just think it's funny that that the implication that we would hate women with strong opinions. Like, dude, women won't even stand near you. You fucking slimy people.
Yeah.
No, I mean for the record, Republicans, I wasn't offended that they didn't remember my name. I was hurt. These are two different things. Of being offended and being hurt are two different things. I wasn't offended by anything, but I was hurt that somebody who said they loved me didn't remember me.
Right. And I just want to point out to the up above that the Republican says if your wife is female with an opinion, talking to CBR Vegas, he says if your wife is female with an opinion, she most definitely would be hated by this SJW slacktivist panel. Now, okay, maybe the slacktivist SJW panel comment is fair, but has anybody met Rob's girl Peach? If that's not a female with an opinion, I don't know who is.
Yeah. There you go. and you actually, everyone except Michael here has met Suzanne, so same thing.
Yeah.
But Republicans is just bitter and angry because no one has ever loved him, nor will they ever.
Well, that's a bit cruel. I hope that's not true, though. But no, he's irredeemable. I grant you that.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough said. I had something I wanted to say way back when Rob was talking, but I didn't want to interrupt, and now I forgot what it was. What were you talking about like 5 minutes ago, Rob?
Penis.
No, something more to do with something about the whole relationship. I can't remember what it was about.
About Ozzy.
Yeah, it was 5 minutes ago. It's probably about Ozzy. Just that he finally, after a decade, has realized he made a mistake and he should have listened to me all along.
Yeah. Well, I mean, regret is a tricky thing, isn't it? Because if you regret, if you want to maintain a level of happiness about your current situation, then you shouldn't have regrets, because if you did anything differently, you wouldn't be where you are now, right? On the other hand, one of my longest YouTube subscribers said to me once, if you want to say, he said this to me. He said, if you say to me that you don't have regrets, I don't think you lived your life properly. And I think by that he meant if you haven't made lots of mistakes and recognize that, then you're just ignorant and in denial. But the thing is, I recognize all my mistakes. I just don't regret making them, because I'm still where I am, partly because I did the things I did the way I did them. And sure, man, I've hurt lots of people. I've made plenty of mistakes, in my life. No matter how good of a parent you are, you could have always done better. Things like that.
See, my regrets were for things that I wanted to do but didn't.
Well, it's that old phrase. It's better to regret the things you do than to regret the things you don't do. Regretting the things you do tends to be the more dangerous path. So it's a bit perilous, right? But no, I don't really believe in. I mean, if I have any regrets, it's that I've hurt people, and I don't regret doing the things I did, but I regret the consequences of doing the things that I did as far as they affect other people, But I know for a fact if I could rewind my whole life, I'd make every single decision the same, And the day I most fervently crystallized that in my brain was when my firstborn, when they wrapped her up and weighed her and tagged her and everything, and then they handed me my baby. And I'm looking at my little girl, and I had what you call a spiritual experience, right? Because I'm looking at my little girl, and I realized that every single decision I made before that day had to be right, because there she was. And that was such an affirmation for me, because all I ever wanted to be was dad. That was my major aspiration in life, and and I don't know how else to describe it, but it was kind of like a spiritual thing. It was really like profoundly deep and kind of shook my person, Yeah.
Yeah, I've often done that thing of like, if you could go back in time and change one thing or make a bunch of changes, you go back or go back and live your life over again, knowing what you know now. And I realized how fraught that was, because part of the problem is that a small, even a, it's the whole butterfly effect, right? Even a fairly small change early on could completely change your life. And I thought about it, like certain it's like, well, I'd like to change this, but I want to make sure I still meet this other person. Well, I don't remember the exact day I met a particular person or what the circumstances were. So, and if I created those as a contrivance, would it go the same? I mean, because okay, I know what happened, but now I'm a different person than I was back then. So maybe you wouldn't go the way I think it would, because I would behave differently than I did at the time.
Hey, you know, there's been 3 different series of the TV show called The Twilight Zone, right? There's the black and white ones with Rod Serling. There was a series that they did for 2 or 3 years in the middle of the 80s. And then there was another one that was narrated by Forrest Whitaker, I think. Or not Forrest Whitaker, but I can't think of his name right now. Anyway, that came out in the early noughties. But there's an episode in from the 80s series. I think it's called Once We Were Kings or something like that. And it's about this guy who's an Elvis impersonator. And by some Twilight Zone-y thing, he ends up going back to the 50s and he meets Elvis. And Elvis accidentally dies. And so this Elvis impersonator has to go pretend to be Elvis for the rest of his life. And because he was such a big Elvis fan and an Elvis impersonator, he knew all the mistakes Elvis made. He's like, at the end of the episode, like, I tried to do it all the way I remembered it, but I don't know, he knew he was going to die, of course, on a toilet.
Wow.
But it was a pretty deep episode of The Twilight Zone.
Mm.
Wow.
Is anybody here a fan of The Twilight Zone? Any of the 3 series?
I like the original series.
Have you ever seen the Twilight Zone episode called The Shelter?
Probably maybe not by name.
It's on Netflix, and it's one of the best episodes of TV, single episodes of TV you will ever watch. Another one is The Obsolete Man, which stars Burgess Meredith.
Yes, that one I've seen.
That one is absolutely stunning. Yeah, there's quite a few of those old Twilight Zones that they're in a league all by themselves. It amazes me that such intellectual ideas were sort of proffered as entertainment in 1963. Do you know what I mean? It's so far out past as Honey Boo Boo or any of that stuff. I don't even know what to say.
There's a meme picture based on one of them of a kid casting people out to the corn. And that one to me is the whole series. That one meme survives in my head. Like, that kid was evil. Power did get to him.
Okay. I was just reading which episode that was, Paul. I think I did The Shelter. I think I did see that one.
Oh, it's deep as hell, man. It's really.
Oh, yeah.
I could almost tell you the whole thing, but I don't want to do that. I would suggest everyone in the audience go to Netflix if you have Netflix. It's on The Twilight Zone is on Netflix at the moment. All the original black and white series are there. I think it's in the 3rd season. And
season 3, episode 3.
Yeah.
To that point, one episode that's got a similar theme, although plays out somewhat differently, but not entirely. The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street.
Yeah, that's a great episode. Yeah, and the 80s version of that, which is about nuclear war or something, or I can't remember. It's the noughties version of it, and it's about terrorism rather than aliens. But in the 50s version or 60s version, rather, it's about aliens. Ooh, maybe it's extraterrestrials or whatever. But yeah, in the noughties version, it's maybe there's a terrorist that's moved into our street, and it's virtually exactly the same episode, but it's just got that different twist to it. There's another one. It's in the old black and white series of the Twilight Zone. I think it's called A Different Kind of Stopwatch, or A Kind of Stopwatch. I think that's what it's called, Kind of Stopwatch. And this guy who talks too much gets a hold of this stopwatch, right? And finds out that when he presses the stopwatch, reality stops, but he keeps going. And at first he doesn't know what to do with it. Then he realizes he can go and rob a bank with it, right? So he goes to the bank and stops time. And everybody's frozen there, and he just starts looting the drawers and looting the people, and everything's fine. But he accidentally drops the watch, and it breaks. And everybody's stopped. So he's effectively the last man on earth, right? I mean, because you can't start it back again. The watch is broken. And then in the 80s Twilight Zone, they do a version of that where this woman finds this stopwatch on a necklace. But instead of doing it to rob banks or everything, because this is the 80s, right? So she finds out that when she stops it stops time. And so every time her kids are giving her too much grief or her husband's giving her too much grief, she just stops it for a while, lays back, goes swimming or whatever, has a sauna, and then starts it again when she's ready. One time she's had enough and she stops time and she goes out and she's doing, she goes, sorry, I get ahead of myself. Basically, she goes out, there's nuclear bombs in the sky heading toward the ground. And so she stops time. But of course, you can't start it back up again, because as soon as you start it up, it's going to all blow up. So that was a pretty cool twist on the same sort of theme.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you don't have to watch those episodes, eh?
This is one of the ones with William Shatner was one of the 60s ones where he stops in the diner and the thing keeps telling him, like, you know, he's trying to get the answers and the things keeps giving these vague answers, and he gets assessed, and he actually, like, you get the impression he never leaves the diner because he has to keep finding out what to do, because he's obsessed with, you know, instead of just experiencing life, he's got to know, you know, what's the right thing to do.
That reminds me of a thing. I mean, let's just say that there was such a thing as God, right? And if God came to you, right, and you knew for sure that it was real and said to you, here's the meaning of life, boom. Well, then what? Then what are you going to do with it? What are you supposed to do with that?
Well, it depends on what the answer is.
Yeah.
Does it?
On the answer?
Because, well, I mean, what if the answer, I don't know.
What if the answer is milkshakes?
Huh?
What if the answer is milkshakes?
Right. What if the answer is milkshakes?
I'm going to go get some more milkshakes.
That's awesome.
Well, I mean, because it really does, to me, it does depend, because yeah, if it's something that I can or want to do, that maybe I should be doing more of, that I was like, that maybe I was avoiding because I didn't think I could or should do it, and then it's like, no, really, the answer is this. I'm like, oh, okay,
Milkshakes.
Milkshakes. I'm good with that answer.
Hey, listen, I think I'm gonna call it an end to the show, because we're like nearly 3.5 hours, and milkshakes to me sounds like the perfect place to end it. So I want to thank all the audience, almost all the audience, for participating in the show tonight. And obviously, I want to thank everybody who's been on screen before and is still here now, obviously. And I will see you guys in the after chat. And please join us next week for another edition of the